Hello, 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 and welcome once again to Not a Prog Reborn, but the finale of the Lorwyn set review. My name is Im Kostler, longtime Magic the Gathering player, been playing since around Onslaught era. Have taken many breaks, but have been playing fairly consistently since the end of Bloomburrow, start of Duskmourn. Primarily a Magic the Gathering arena player these days, usually best of one standard, though have been moving into draft and limited with my dissatisfaction with current standard. And we're going to be looking at the last bit of Lorwyn Eclipsed spoilers. We have already reached the pre-release, already reached the full set reveal. They give us only a single week to go through all these cards. So we've been at it fast and furious, trying to get our thoughts on all of these cards out in a timely manner. And they've been looking pretty interesting. We'll need to take some time to go back over and sort of see how I feel about the set as a whole. Maybe I'll give some of my thoughts at the end of the stream. But yeah, just a little reminder of what we do in this stream. We're going to be looking at where we left off last stream was the beginning of the artifacts. But between last stream and today, they obviously released the full set, so we're going to just go right on back to the start, cover anything that we have already might have missed so far, or was released between now and then in colorless, in Wooburg, multicolor, whatever have you, as we make our way all the way to the end. I will be primarily evaluating these cards from a standard and limited perspective, as those are the formats that I am most familiar with. I do play some Commander and Paper at my LGS, but I do not feel that evaluating based off of Commander is all that interesting, given how wide open the format is. With that being said, we still have quite a number of cards to go through. If I'm looking at the list, there are about 87 cards still left to go through. And I'm a bit of a rambler, so let's go ahead and get started with Changeling Wayfinder. For 3 generic, we have a creature shapeshifter at common. It's a 1/2 that has Changeling. And one thing I forgot to mention when we do these reviews, every new stream that I do these, the first time that I see a new non-evergreen mechanic, I'll explain it that first time, go into sort of the things that I think are interesting or important to know, but then assume that we know exactly what that mechanic means as it appears later on during the stream. So, Changeling here, it just means that even though this creature is a creature type shapeshifter, it's actually every single creature type in Magic. It's a dog, it's a dragon, it's a sliver. Most importantly for this set, It's things like elf, goblin, kithkin, elemental, fairy, merfolk, things like that. Giant, things like that. Given that the set is fairly creature type tuned, especially from the limited perspective. So, card also says, when this creature enters, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. This type of card's been around a million different ways and a million different times throughout a million different limited formats. It ends up often playing better than you think. It's kind of a glue piece for, especially if you're trying to go in any sort of 3 or 4 or even 5 color nonsense pile. That's base. It also makes sure that you're going to keep hitting your land drops if your deck is primarily 4 and 5 drops, which there are archetypes in the format where you're wanting to play higher mana value creatures in spells. So, I mean, certainly not constructed viable. I wouldn't say that it's a high pick in limited, but as people play the format and figure out the archetypes to go for, maybe its stock will rise and fall based off of whether or not it's very viable to go 3 color, or whether you're perfectly fine just being 2 color, whether it's viable to have mid to late game deck, or whether you need to be very aggressive. So, Changeling Wayfinder. Onto our first new white card, Adept Water Shaper. For 2 and a white, we have a creature Merfolk Cleric. At rare, it says it's a 3/4 that says other tapped creatures you control have indestructible. So, anytime that any creatures that are attacking are going to have indestructible. Anything that you tap for Convoke is going to have indestructible. Pretty powerful effect, and the body itself is not that bad for 3 mana. A 3/4 for 3, it's perfectly reasonable. It is only other tapped creatures you control, so you're not really going to get. You can't tap this to protect itself. Your opponent will have the option to kill this in order to get at something else, but they'll have to kill this before they can get at the thing that they actually want to get at. If you can tap it in some way. As far as standard playability goes, if Station was instant speed, this would be a lot better. It's kind of a creature version of what people do for Lost in the Maze, but obviously you can, if you have like vehicles and whatnot lying around, you can tap your creatures at instant speed with the vehicles in order to protect them from removal spells. Destroy or damage based removal. If they get exiled, if their power and toughness reaches, or if their toughness reaches 0, it'll still die. The only place that I can really think for this is in some sort of like Kona deck, for the same reason that people play copies of Lost in the Maze, just as a way to protect their Kona on the turn that they go to for their combo play. Those decks are usually Simic. There have been like Selesnya Kona decks in the past. A little more fair Kona. Just sort of cheating out some big spell rather than trying to go combo kill, win the game with Omniscience. I'm not sure I really see it with this card. This to me kind of feels like a commander-ish card. In limited, it'll be fine, right? The body is fine. You just leave this back. They have to use removal on this. All the same reasons that we just talked about at the beginning. But yeah, Adept Water Shaper. Don't really think it's going to see standard play. Going to be fine in limited. On to our first... No, that's wrong. That's wrong. This is our second Planeswalker of the set. We did see Oko, I think, on the very first stream. Ajani Outland Chaperone. For 1 white, we have a legendary Planeswalker, Ajani, at Mythic. Ajani starts at 3 loyalty, and then gets a loyalty ability of +1. So if you want to gain 1 loyalty, you create a 1/1 green and white Kithkin creature token. Cool. -2, Ajani deals 4 damage to target tapped creature. Alright. And then -8, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is your life total. And you put any number of non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Obviously, the ultimate is game winning, especially in limited. Overall, when you evaluate a Planeswalker, Planeswalkers have gotten a lot odder than they initially were. You used to sort of just see Planeswalkers as one way to protect themselves, one way to gain card advantage, win the game ultimate. And this is kind of closer to a traditional Planeswalker. Here, Ajani has really 2 ways to protect himself. You can kill a creature, basically kill a creature, by dealing 4 damage to target tapped creature. You can also protect yourself by just putting dorks in your opponent's path. You create these 1/1 white Kithkins. Eventually, they'll be able to block for Ajani. Standard playability. There's no, like, over-the-top ability from Ajani here. Other than, obviously, the ultimate, but it's going to take 5 turns? 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, and then minus. So 6 turns before you can get the ultimate off. And it's not even like there is doubling season in standard, but it's not even like that there's a this is one of those things where you can instant ult with it with doubling season, because it would only come in with 6 counters on it. You'd still have to wait 2 turns to do the +1 once and then the -8. I could certainly see this being like a sideboard juke that a lot of aggressive decks might want, aggressive white decks might want access to, because it is inherent card advantage. You're just creating these 1/1s. Eventually, your opponent will have to deal with them or deal with the Ajani, and if it's just let loose, then all the targeted removal in the world, all the sweepers in the world, you're eventually going to run your opponent out of them. The -2 to hit something for 4 damage, it's fine in the right matchup, but I really think that this is kind of just like a sideboard juke to me, I feel like that slot in your sideboard for an aggro deck is already kind of taken up by Elspeth. Sure, this is 3 mana instead of 5 mana. If your main deck is like a 20 land deck or like a 20 or 21 land deck, something that's real low to the ground, maybe even like a 19 land deck, then maybe you're not going to be able to reach Elspeth consistently. But if you're playing like 22 lands, 24 lands, something like that, just Elspeth does a lot of the same things that Ajani does, but ends the game significantly faster. You can obviously combo Elspeth and Ajani, because Ajani is making tokens, Elspeth makes tokens or doubles the tokens that you're making. This just kind of feels like a fairly middling Planeswalker. It's definitely better than the Oko that we've seen, but it's not like slam dunk Elspeth or even slam dunk Ugin, something that you're gonna, is gonna have immediate heavy impact on standard, like Planeswalkers often used to have. In limited, this is obviously insane. Planeswalkers generally are insane in limited because they typically don't print at lower rarity ways to directly interact with Planeswalkers, so you're having to sort of deal with it through normal creature combat, and Ajani protects himself very, very well. So, going to pretty much win you every single limited game that you can get this out. But yeah, from a standard perspective, I don't know. I'm not sure I fully see it here with Ajani. Encumbered Regery. For 1 and a white, we have a creature, Merfolk Soldier. At uncommon, it is a 5/4 for 2. Obviously, there's going to be some downside. This creature enters with 3 -1/-1 counters on it, so it's a 2/1 for 2. Whenever a creature becomes tapped, whenever this creature becomes tapped while it has a -1/-1 counter on it, remove a -1/-1 counter from it. Sure, so every time that you attack, you can remove -1/-1 counters from it. If you play this and then immediately use it to convoke something, that's going to also get the ball rolling a little bit sooner. So when you go to attack with this, it's attacking as a 3/2 for 2 mana. 3/2 for 2 is pretty aggressive. And if your opponent isn't able to immediately trade with it or deal with it, gets to 4/3 that you only spent 2 mana on, gets to 5/4 that you only spent 2 mana on, that's a pretty aggressive creature that's going to kill your opponent pretty quickly. So I think that this is a pretty high pick in draft. Not really anywhere there in limited, or sorry, in constructed, but a pretty high draft pick, I would think, especially if you are have any sort of aggression in your deck. Ever Shrieks, maybe Ever Shrikes. I'm going to say Ever Shrieks Gift. For a single white, we have an enchantment aura at uncommon. It's enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has flying. And then for 1 and a white and Blight 2, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. Activate only as a sorcery. So here's another way that folks or the WotC designers, play design team, are trying to get around the usual typical downsides of auras. In that even if they remove the creature that has the aura attached to it, you can get this back. The cost is relatively high. Blight 2 is pretty high, and yet you can only do this at sorcery speed, so you can't just sort of act like you have removal or act like you have a flash creature or whatever and then do it on instep somewhere, or do it during combat, which you're chumping with. Still, I think 1 mana to semi-permanently upgrade something with flying is not awful. I think it would be a fine pick in some sort of aggressive deck. Bounce something, or not bounce something, jump something over your opponent's blockers when they weren't expecting it. Get to kind of move it around at the cost of Blight 2. Seems like an okay, not really combat trick, but an okay aura. Usually I think auras are pretty weak. This one, the cost up front is not that bad, of just being 1 mana. And the effect is pretty good, and worst case scenario, you can get it back later on to try again. Keep Out is up next. For 1 and a white, we have an instant at common. It has choose one. Keep Out deals 4 damage to target tapped creature or destroy target enchantment. This is the design space given to us because of best of 1. You don't really want just straight up disenchant effects in your sets anymore, because best of 1 folks aren't playing with sideboards. And this is fine. You know, Razor Rings was a fine removal spell in Avatar. This one doesn't really. This only really deals with aggressive creatures. You can't use this to. You typically can't use this to deal with blockers. Given that there's so much Convoke, maybe you can sort of sneak it in unexpectedly, but generally this is your opponent attacks you, you play Keep Out to deal with their attacker. 2 mana white common removal. We already have the 2 mana pacifism. I feel like there's a decent amount of removal in this set. But yeah, Keep Out. Not much else to say here. Kinscare Sentry. For 1 and a white, we have a creature Kithkin Soldier at rare. It is a 2/2 first strike lifelinker that says whenever this creature attacks, you may put a creature card with a mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, where X is the number of attacking creatures you control. This card is extraordinarily good. It works very, very well with Mobilize. Somebody in a Discord that I'm in was pointing out, if you go turn 1 Stadium Headliner, turn 2 this, turn 3 attack with this and the Stadium Headliner, you can cheat out a tapped and attacking Abhorrent Oculus. That's obviously like the best case scenario, but even you can just some sort of white weenie deck. You're playing this alongside Voice of Victory. Voice of Victory protects this from being dealt with at instant speed. It having first strike means that even though typically this would be something that you would normally think is a one-shot thing, you attack this in, your opponent trades with it, whatever. Having first strike means that they have to they have to really mean it to get this creature off the battlefield. I'm definitely, I feel like I've repeated myself a bunch when I do these reviews. I remember talking about invasion reinforcements when the last Airbender set came out, but I'm definitely going to be looking at that Boros tokens, you know, War Master's Gift or whatever, the Adeline, Delny, that kind of stuff. You know, this works extremely well with Delny. It's a creature with power 2 or less, so you're getting the double trigger with Delny. You can just empty your hand extraordinarily quickly. So yeah, Kinscare Sentry. I think this is an extremely good card for white-based Boros decks, or even just white weenie. And in limited, it's going to often be doing very similar things. If you get this, just go aggressive. Just keep your curve very, very low. Pick up 1-drops where people normally don't pick up 1-drops, and just try and dump your hand as quickly as possible. Moonlit Lamenter for 2 and a green, 2 and a white. I saw the Tree Folk, so I thought green. We have a creature, Tree Folk Cleric, at uncommon. It is a 2/5 that enters with a -1/-1 counter. So it enters as a 1/4. And then you can pay 1 and a white to remove a counter from this creature to draw a card. It's interesting that this is in white. By itself, you only get access to 1 card from this for 2 mana, but obviously if you blight on top of it, do other things to get counters on it, you can turn this into just nice incidental card advantage. Obviously not anywhere close to constructed viable, but I think a pretty good card for limited. It blocks very well, even while it has the -1/-1 counter on it. Just being a 2/5 means you're holding back your opponent's board for quite a while. Yeah, Moonlit Lamenter. Protective Response is up next for 2 and a white. We have an instant at uncommon. It has Convoke, destroy target attacking or blocking creature. These type of free, quote unquote, free kill spells, very, very good. You sit there, you tap out to play your creature. Your opponent thinks they have a good attack. They see that you're tapped out. They can't really. Maybe you have 1 mana open. They can't really just assume that they're fine from a kill spell, because this just comes out of nowhere. Very, very good card for limited. Don't really think that it's something that would see standard play, but it's not that far off in any sort of go wide deck for the exact same reason, just being able to convoke this out. If you're generating tokens, stuff like that, you can go, like, say Selesnya Rabbits. You go, like, turn 3, hop to it, create 3 1/1 rabbits, rabbit creature tokens, attack with your frog or your the rabbit that grows based off of the number of creatures you have on the battlefield, and you're still just holding up interaction even after playing your hop to it. So yeah, I think in that deck, this has a chance to see play. And in limited, it's going to make life miserable. So Protective response. River Guard's Reflexes. For 1 on a white, we have an instant at common. It says target creature gets +2/+2 and gains first strike until end of turn, and untap it. This is another card where you're like, this is going to make combat miserable if your opponent is in white. 2 mana, untap, +2/+2, and first strike. Ugh. You're going to lose hard to this spell at some point during your play. So just be ready for it. Obviously not constructed viable, but yeah. 2 mana is a little on the expensive side. Well, I shouldn't say a little on the expensive side. It's where it needs to be. If it was cheaper, it would be insane. But being 2 mana, you can kind of hone in on whether somebody has this. If they're just weirdly leaving 2 mana up all the time. So, just keep that in mind. Timid Shield Bearer is up next for 1 on a white. We have a creature, Kitkin Soldier, at common. It is a 2/2. And for 4 and a white, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Type of card's been printed for decades now. It's perfectly fine as a curve filler. Nice mana outlet when the game goes super long. Not much else to say. Wanderbrine Trapper. Kind of gave the game away. For a single white, we have a creature, Merfolk Scout, at uncommon. It is a 2/1, so a pretty Savannah Lions stat line. And then for a single white, tap this and tap another untapped creature you control. Tap target creature and opponent controls. I think it's pretty good. It's a 1 mana 2/1. So if you're not needing it to be defensive, then get this out early, you put a little pressure onto your opponent, and then when the board starts getting gummed up, it doesn't just become, you know, a chump blocker later on. You can actually hold back your opponent. Plus, given that we've seen that there are synergies in this Azorius tribe, this Merfolk tribe, for tapping things, this can trigger your gain 2 life or loot or whatever have you. So seems like a pretty good pickup in your white aggressive decks. On the blue, Champions of the Shoal. For 3 and a blue, we have a creature, Merfolk Soldier. At rare, it is a 4/6. It says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, behold a merfolk and exercise it. Sorry, not exercise, exile it. This is our first time seeing behold. All behold means is you're revealing a merfolk from your hand or pointing at a merfolk on the battlefield. In this case, you also would be revealing and exiling it, whether it's from your hand or on the battlefield. Whenever this creature enters or becomes tapped, so we just talked about, things having tap triggers, tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. When this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to its owner's hand. So, you kind of have card disadvantage from playing this when you initially play it, but you're going to get your thing back eventually. It's not when the creature dies, it's just when it leaves battlefield. So if your opponent bounces it, if they exile it, or if they kill it, you're going to get your card back. I think this card's great. 4 mana for 4/6. ETB, tap and stun something, and then every time it attacks, or even every time that you convoke with it, tap and stun something. The stun, giving it the stun counter is the big one. This card seems incredibly good. Very, very high draft pick. A little too small bally for standard. We're not in this kind of mid-range game in standard, but extremely good in draft. Glamourmite. For 2 and a blue, we have a creature Fairy Rogue. At common, it is a 2/2 with flash and flying, and when this creature enters, choose 1, tap target creature, or untap target creature. This card's pretty good. It's only at common. 3 mana for a 2/2 flyer is already alright. It having flash is great, and you flash this in against an opponent who's wanting to attack. You get to stop that attack, clear the way for your attack, or flash this in after your opponent declared attackers, thinking that their way was clear. This gets to jump in front of something and untap something on your end that can maybe eat one of their creatures. So I think this is a pretty good card. Not much else to say here. Glamourmite. Glen-Elandra Guardian. For 2 and a blue, we have a creature Fairy Wizard at rare. It is a 3/4 flash flying. So definitely a lot better stats, but it is rare compared to common. This creature enters with a -1/-1 counter on it. So it's really a 2/3 flash flying. Still better stats, but not quite as good. But it has, for 1 and a blue, and remove a counter from this creature, counter target non-creature spell, its controller draws a card. Yeah, everything about it was so good until you read that final line. I want to look up. This is an obvious callback to a card from the original Lorwyn block called Glen-Elandra Archmage, which was a card that you paid 1 and sacrificed it to counter a target non-creature spell, but it also had persist, so you got 2 uses of it. I was just seeing if the original Glen-Elandra had let your opponent draw a card. The obvious, like, insane thing with this, maybe it would be just too good, because again, we've talked about this in previous streams, but it doesn't say remove a -1/-1 counter. It just says remove a counter. So if you are playing Spyglass Siren, you're playing things that generate map tokens so that you can explore with this and maybe get +1/+1 counters on it, or any other random way to get +1/+1 counters on this, then if you just had a repeatable way to counter target non-creature spells and your opponent got nothing out of it, then maybe that's just a little too good. Is interesting, like, for like the worst negate of all time, flash this in and then pay 1 and a blue to negate something of your opponent's. I think at that point you're probably rather be playing Aang, Swift Savior, or Aven Interrupter. It's still probably fine. Probably even good, right? Even if you can't get extra counters on this consistently, you get to counter one thing, one important thing with this, and then it becomes a 3/4 flyer after you make that counter to speed up the clock so that you don't have to give your opponent many more cards, or if you don't have any other ways to counter stuff, it's probably still going to be fine. It's not like if it didn't have its controller draws a card, it's probably like one of the top cards in the set. Might even still be one of the top cards in the set, but do have to give it a little bit of pause there. In limited, negate isn't that important in limited. Just having it on a otherwise fine body is perfectly fine. I don't know if I'm like windmill slam pack one picking one this, but if I'm already in some sort of tempo-ish deck, then I would be absolutely happy picking this up. Illusion Spinners is up next. For 4 and a blue, we have a creature Fey Wizard at uncommon. It's a 4/3. It says you must cast this spell, or sorry, you may cast this spell as though it had flash if you control a fairy. It also has flying, and this creature has hexproof as long as it's untapped. That's awful. Awful as in awful to play against. Having hexproof, just sitting there menacingly having hexproof, you can't deal with it, and then they finally attack. 5 mana is a little on the expensive side, but it is a 4/3 flyer. And as long, I think even if you can't flash it in, it's still fine. It's obviously great if you flash it in, because you're playing fairies, you're probably wanting to be a little controlling or a little more tempo-y, so you hold up your counter magic, you hold up your interaction, and then flash this in on instep, and then your opponent, who might have also been trying to play around you having counter magic, holding up their removal as they're waiting for you to make your move on your instep, goes, crap, I can't use my removal on this thing. They just got to have their turn, and I'm sitting here holding my open mana, feeling very sad for myself. This is a very good card in limited. 5 mana is too expensive for constructed, but a very, very good card in limited. Noggle the Mind. For 1 in a blue, we have an enchantment aura at uncommon. It has flash, it has enchant creature, and enchanted creature loses all abilities, and is a colorless Noggle with a base power and toughness 1/1. And I don't really know what a Noggle is. It's kind of like, I think it's kind of supposed to be like in Pinocchio when the kids start like smoking and drinking and stuff, and they all start going crazy. They all start like getting horse faces and whatnot. I feel like that's what's kind of going on here. But I don't really know the story behind what a Noggle is. Anyways, this is alright removal. Loses all abilities, becomes colorless Noggle. If your opponent had blight counters on it, then this is probably going to kill the thing if you're just looking to kill something off. But otherwise, you're just neutering this thing. Typically, this has been at 1 mana, but it's also not typically been at instant speed. So that's good. Like I said, I think that there's quite a bit of removal in this set, so it's probably going to be a very interactive, interaction-heavy set. Don't think of this as constructed play. You would much rather just be playing unable to scream or witness protection or whatever have you, if you're looking for that sort of blue interaction. Rime Chill is up next for 6 in a blue. We have an instant at uncommon, and it has Vivid. This is our first instance of Vivid. Vivid just lets you do something based off of the number of colors among permanents you control. So this spell costs 1 generic less to cast for each color among permanents you control. Tap up to 2 target creatures, put a stun counter on each of them, and draw a card. So we've seen with a lot of other Vivid stuff, they've been on creatures, and so those Vivid cards actively contribute to the Vivid count. Here being an instant, this is not going to contribute to Vivid. Important things to note if you're newer to Magic the Gathering. Lands, even if you can tap for, even if your mana base allows you to tap for all 5 colors, the lands themselves inherently do not have color. They are inherently colorless. So this is caring about basically non-land permanents. There's one very weird scenario. There's a card. There's a green aura that you can enchant a land that to allow it to tap for additional mana that turns that land into color. But outside of that scenario, you're really basically looking at non-land permanents when you're trying to count up your Vivid. And where would I need this to be to feel happy about it? Instant speed, double Frost Links, draw a card. Frost Links itself, it would Rowdy Snowballers from the Last Airbender. Rowdy Snowballers was not that great. That was 3 mana and you had a 2/2. This is instant speed though, which does make it a lot better because you're not really, with Rowdy Snowballers, you're mostly having to use it offensively. Here you're able to do it defensively. You wait for beginning of combat, you cast this spell, tap their 2 things, and they're going to have their full stun counter on them, so they're not going to be able to attack you with them either for a whole additional turn. Maybe 4 in a blue if I had two colors already on the battlefield. I might be fine with this. Once you get to 3, I think you're ecstatic. But I think if you're paying 5 in a blue or 6 in a blue to cast this, you're not that happy with it. I'm not sure this is a super high pick. Maybe it plays out better than I think it does, but yeah, Rime Chill. Rime Fire Torque is up next. Don't look at the art. For 1 in a blue, we have an artifact at rare. This artifact enters. As it enters, choose a creature type. Whenever a permanent you control of the chosen type enters, put a charge counter on this artifact, and then tap to remove 3 charge counters from this artifact. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell this way, copy it. This way? That's weird. You may choose new targets for the copy. I think for the most part, this is kind of a commander card. But mostly because in standard, you're not really dealing with a lot of synergistic creature typal decks. There's obviously we've mentioned the Simic Merfolk deck many times. There's potential for like a goblin deck or an elf deck in standard, but both of those don't touch blue. And I don't think that there's quite enough like fairy support to do anything like that. But the only thing that I could possibly see from this is maybe like a one of in your Azorius synthesizer list. The way I see it is you name construct, and you're generating all these constructs from your synthesizer. You'll eventually be able to double cast a United Battlefront with this. Maybe that's just more win more. The deck is already kind of fairly set in stone. It's really just sort of like and this only being 2 mana value and not 3 mana value means it doesn't trigger your synthesizers itself. So you're kind of competing in the same spot as Spring Blade Saw Blades or Spring Loaded Saw Blades, the Cryogenic Relic, and Clay Fired Bricks. That's why I say like maybe like a one of in taking up one of those slots. You might be able to put that into that deck. Otherwise, and even there, it might just be win more. Otherwise, I think this is fairly easily just a commander card. Limited, you're certainly trying to be typal in limited. But 2 mana do nothing to eventually maybe get value off of this. Maybe you draw I think one of the issues with something like this is like you're thinking to yourself, oh, okay, I will play this and I'll be able to double removal. Well, a lot of the removal in the set seems to be enchantment based. There's like 3 different types of pacifisms. There's a Banishing Light style effect. There's still a number of instant and sorcery speed removal, but you're paying 2 mana for something that really doesn't affect the board until way later. Maybe if you are very controlling, you can get away with this because you could double some sort of draw spell or something like that. But I think that this is mostly a commander card. Rhymekin Recluse is up next. For 2 and a blue, we have a creature elemental wizard at uncommon. It is a 3/2 with when this creature enters, return up to 1 other target creature to its owner's controller, to its owner's hand. Sorry. Great card. Mana War. That's a 3/2. Pretty good body for a Man of War. We saw just how powerful. What was it called? It was the submarine. I forget it started with an A. I can't remember the name of it, but it was the submarine from The Last Airbender. That was like the best uncommon in the entire set. This is probably going to be very similar. That was a 3/3. You did have to jump through a little bit of hoops, but it ended up the reason that it was so powerful is the additional 3 mana that you had to spend to turn it into an actual creature was not actually that difficult because of waterbending. Here it's a 3/2 just immediately. So you're losing 1 toughness for not having to spend extra mana. This card's just great. Very, very good card. Silvergill Mentor is up next for 1 and a white. We have a creature Merfolk Wizard at uncommon. It is a 2/1 that says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, either behold a Merfolk or pay an additional 2 generic. So it's behold a Merfolk and 1 in a blue, or 3 in a blue if you don't have any other Merfolk. And then when this enters, create a 1/1 white and blue Merfolk creature token. If you're having to pay 4 mana for this, this is not that good of a card. But assuming that you're drafting this in a deck that has any other Merfolk, and given that Merfolk is a supported creature type, you probably will, even if it's just a changeling, you probably will have something to behold. A 3/2 across 2 bodies on turn 2, that's pretty good. Silvergill Mentor. Summit Sentinel is up next for... I should go back. This is close if the Merfolk deck in Standard comes together. This could see play. Raise the Alarm style effects have seen play across many different Standard formats. And this is just, it's not instant speed, but this is 2 mana for 2 bodies and 3 total power across those 2 bodies. So this could, if a Merfolk deck exists, could see play in Standard. All right, let's go back to Summit Sentinel. For 1 and a blue, we have a creature Elemental Soldier at common. It is a 1/3 that when this creature dies, draw a card. Curve filler, pretty good in a control deck. You just sort of slows your opponent down in the early game. Eventually you chump this or use this as part of a double block or whatever to get that card draw later on as you're digging for your way to turn the corner or your additional removal, but not anything to like write home about. Thirst for Identity. This is a fun, not a reprint, but a callback to a cycle of cards, Thirst for X. For 2 and a blue, we have an instant at uncommon. It says draw 3, then discard 2 unless you discard a creature card. Generally, your Thirst for X, they're templated in the way where it's draw 3, then discard 2 unless you discard a blah card. A land card, an instant card, a sorcery card, an artifact, yada yada yada. It being creature especially in limited, means that this is often going to be 3 mana, instant speed, draw 3, discard 1. Because creature is where the majority of your deck is going to be. So this seems very, very good for limited. And I could see this is even potentially playable in Standard. I don't think you're going to see it in like your Superior Spider-Man deck or something like that, but I could see somebody play a couple copies of this in some sort of tempo, blue-based tempo deck to refill their hand for their counters, and they dump like one of their creatures that are no longer relevant on the board. Yeah, Thirst for Identity. Gonna be very, very good and limited. On to black. We are moving right along. Barbed Bloodletter. For 1 on the black, we have an artifact equipment at common. It has flash, And when it enters, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains Wither until end of turn. This is actually one that we haven't seen a ton of. We saw one example of Wither last stream, and I think it was pretty late in the stream, and I completely forgot to mention what Wither was. But Wither is, you can read it right here, your creature deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. So it's kind of like your creature turns your opponent's creatures. Your creature hits your opponent's creatures like if you've played Hearthstone, where they have permanent damage when your creature has Wither. It's fine. I don't think that it's like incredible or of an ability, but if you flash and equip this to something that isn't going to trade with your opponent's creature because they did some like pump spell or whatever on it, then this will make it so that it will still die later when the pump spell or the pump effect dissipates at end of turn. They're still going to have the -1/-1 counters, and it'll eventually die. Or you can use it to kind of like nerf one of their big creatures. Finishing reading the card, equip creature gets +1/+2, and it has an equip cost of 2. So you only gain the Wither on that turn that you flashed it in. If you could keep giving your creatures Wither, then I think that this card would be a lot better. As it stands, it seems like a really awkward and weak combat trick / removal spell. Blight Rot up next. For 2 and a black, we have an instant at common. Put 4 -1/-1 counters on target creature. Yeah, I mean, this is your common black removal. Gonna probably kill most things in the format. Slightly better than just target creature gets -4/-4. Very rarely is there a situation where you might even want to target your own creature with this, if you have some way to remove those counters for value. But for the most part, you should just think of this as removal. Does get around indestructibility, which can be a little important. Doesn't come up a ton in limited, but you never know. Anyways, Blight Rot. Boggart Prankster is up next. For 1 and a black, we have a creature, Goblin Warrior, at common. It is a 1/3. It says whenever you attack, target attacking goblin you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Doesn't say another attacking, so this can attack as a 2/3, or it can make your better goblins slightly more powerful on their attack. Poor frog, man. Not much to say here, just a curve filler for a goblin deck. Bog Slither's Embrace. For 1 and a green, 1 and a black. I don't know why I said green. For 1 and a black, we have a sorcery at common. As an additional cost to cast this spell, blight 1 or pay 3 additional colorless. Exile target creature. Jeez. Yeah, this seems great. Sorcery speed, but exile based removal. I mean, this is just more common based removal. Worst case scenario, 5 mana for exile target creature. That's just in certain limited formats, not even that long ago, that's kind of what you'd be fine with playing. I mean, it kind of is similar to Deadly Embrace, I think it was what it was called, from Avatar, where you either had to, it was either for 1 mana and sack something to destroy target creature, or for 5 total mana, destroy target creature. Here it's 2 mana and blight something, so you're not having to fully sacrifice something, and it fully exiles, which can be important given like elves, graveyard synergy, and other ways to use your graveyard. So Bog Slither's Embrace, perfectly fine removal. Creekwood Safe Right is up next. For 1 and a black, we have a creature Elf Warrior at uncommon. It is a 5/5. It's obviously going to be a downside somewhere, and then enters with 3 -1/-1 counters. So it normally is just going to enter as a 2/2. At the beginning of your end step, if there is an elf card in your graveyard and this creature has a -1/-1 counter on it, remove a -1/-1 counter from this creature. So there are a lot of versions of this type of card that we've seen throughout our look at Lorwyn. Generally, the cards have like just straight up, you know, trigger whenever this thing happens. Here, you're only ever going to remove 1 -1/-1 counter at a time, but you don't. Once you get your elf in your graveyard, then this will eventually grow back to its normal size, or I guess not normal size. 2 mana for a 5/5 is not a normal size, but it'll grow back up to its printed power and toughness, instead of having to like make sure a creature died, or play a creature, or tap something, or pay some mana, or whatever have you, right? This seems like a pretty good card. As long as you can get it down early. If you rip this in the late game, it's mostly just going to be a bear, and it's going to take quite a while to turn on. Well, let me think about this, actually. If I don't... When would I start feeling bad about this? Because it takes 3 whole turns, including the turn that you played it, for it to become its printed power and toughness. But I guess the turn that you play it, if you played it on turn 2, you're likely not going to have an elf in your graveyard, so it's still just going to be a bear. But let's say you play it on turn 3, and the previous turn you played the elf that mills 2, and you happen to hit another elf into your graveyard. 2 mana for a 3/3. Pretty good. Do you just sort of hang back and not go attacking because you want to make sure that it gets to 4/4 and then a 5/5, or do you just immediately start attacking? I think if you play this on like turn 3 or turn 4 and you already have an elf in your graveyard, then you're pretty happy. If you play this on turn 2 and you don't consistently have ways to get elves in your graveyard, you're pretty sad. You're not like, it's not awful, it's just a bear. You're perfect. It's a curve filler. And then even if you have an elf in your graveyard and it's like turn 6, you're probably pretty sad at that point. Maybe you're fine if you can like double spell with this. but it seems okay. I think you really need to make sure that you're drafting this in a deck that can consistently get an elf in your graveyard fairly early as well, and not rely on combat or your opponent removing your creature or whatever have you. So yeah, Creekwood's safe right. Gloom Ripper is up next for 3 black. We have a creature, Elf Assassin at rare. It is a 4/4 for 5. So a little low on its stats, but at 5 mana, you often see things being a 4/4. When this creature enters, target creature you control gets +X/+0 until end of turn, and up to 1 target creature an opponent controls gets -0/-X until end of turn, where X is the number of elves you control plus the number of elves in your graveyard. So worst case scenario, this enters, this is the only elf you have in your in-play or in your graveyard. It enters and gives itself, temporarily makes itself a 5/4, but you don't have any, you don't have haste or anything, so that doesn't matter too much. But does -1 or -0/-1 to something, which might be able to kill it. I think, you know, the later the game goes, this gets better and better and better. It's a great top deck in the late game, because even if your opponent has been able to deal with your board, if you're in any kind of elf deck, sure, maybe you're not able to, if this is the only elf on your board, you're not able to get the attack trigger off, but you are able to play this 4/4 and kill their best thing. If you have at least one other creature on the board, then have the swing of, you have this huge attacker that they probably have to chump, plus you killing their best thing. This seems like an absolute bomb in limited. Not quite there in standard. I think even with an elf tribal deck in standard, 5 mana is kind of pushing it, and it's black instead of like green. If it was green, then you could do things like Elvish Archdruid to help cast it, but you're gonna likely have to use your mana, your lands in order to get this out. So don't really see it being a standard player, but an absolute house in limited. Moon Shadow is up next. For a single black, we have a 7/7 creature elemental at Mythic with Menace. Obviously, there's going to be a downside here. This creature enters with 6 -1/-1 counters on it. Whenever one or more permanent cards is put into your graveyard from anywhere while this creature has a -1/-1 counter on it, remove a -1/-1 counter from this creature. Important to note, if you mill, say you have a card that you play this and then you turn 2, you play the elf that mills 2. Even if you hit like 2 lands, 2 permanents, you're only removing 1 counter from this. So to turbo get this up to its 7/7 self, you're going to need a lot of small instances of mill. Or maybe small instances of, like sacrifice a bunch of stuff, whatever have you. Could I see play in like Raise the Past? Probably not. Like maybe as a different avenue of attack. But I think you're kind of already doing very similar stuff in your Raise the Past deck by just playing like your Amalias and your Sir Conrads and stuff like that. This is 1 mana, but those also eventually get bigger than 7/7. The dream is, I saw somebody post this in a Discord, right? Turn 1 this, turn 2 Vampire Hexmage, sack the Vampire Hexmage, attack them with a 7/7 Menace. I'm not sure on this card. Maybe this sees play. The places that I could think that this sees play are Orzhov Sacrifice or Insidious Roots. And with Insidious Roots, this kind of doesn't really help your game plan. And with Orzhov Sacrifice, it's kind of just an idiot that doesn't help you surveil or generate another creature on death or anything like that. It's just a big idiot. So, how good is a big idiot? Not so sure. Also gets absolutely hosed by Rest in Peace, which in your Orzhov Sacrifice or your Insidious Roots deck, you're already terrified of. So it's not like this is like an avenue that you can use to play against Rest in Peace, because they have to enter your graveyard from anywhere. Anyways, Moonshadow. Nightmare Sower is up next. For 3 and a black, we have a creature Fairy Assassin at uncommon. It is a 2/3 flying lifelink. 4 mana for a 2/3 flying lifelink. That seems pretty good. Whenever you cast a spell during your opponent's turn, put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature. This card seems ridiculously good in Limited. It's doing the fairy thing. You want to be controlling, you want to be tempo-y, holding up your mana. It's already a decently statted body. 4 mana for a 2/3 flying lifelink. 4 mana is maybe 1 more than you would like to pay for just a 2/3 flyer, but giving the lifelink makes it much better. And then it just says whenever you cast a spell. It doesn't specifically say instant or sorcery during your opponent's turn. So if you have any sort of flash creatures, which fairies often are, those also just get to put -1/-1 counters on things of your opponents. You just snipe down your opponent's stuff. This seems miserable to play against in Limited. And it's not, oh god, it's not even like a legendary. Imagine your opponent has multiple of these on the battlefield, you're just like dead. The game's over. So yeah, very good Limited card. A little too slow for Standard, but very, very good in Limited. Scarblade's Malice is up next. For a single black, we have an instant at common. It says, target creature you control gains Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. When that creature dies this turn, create a 2/2 black and green elf creature token. So not quite like a not dead after all type of effect. Because you're not getting your same creature back, you're depending on the creature that you put this on, either most likely downgrading, but maybe upgrading your creature if it's just like a random 1/1 token. But also, given the fact that it gives lifelink, you know, you can just use this to give Death Touch and Lifelink to something, and with no expectation that you're going to get the 2/2 off of it. You attack into an opponent that your 2/3 attacks into their 2/4, and you just go, okay, Scarblade's Malice. They bounce off of each other, but your thing dies, and I gain 2 life. And for 1 mana, that's pretty good. It's kind of, you can kind of think of this as like a black fight card, because it's removal, it's black based removal that requires you having a creature and requires that creature getting into quote unquote combat with something else. And this, it gets blown out. Well, yeah, it gets blown out in a lot of the same ways that fights get blown out. If your opponent is able to remove your creature in response to the fight, then you lost your creature plus lost the fight spell. But still, just being 1 mana and instant speed seems like a decent card. Ooh, let me think about this a little bit more. I was going to say, does this combo, does this do Heliod combo? Heliod already does Heliod combo. But there's probably some shenanigans you can do with pingers and like this and a goblin sharpshooter, you know, that kind of stuff that you can also do. Anyways, Taster of Wares, 2 and a black, creature goblin warlock at rare. It's a 3/2, 3 mana for a 3/2. You know, not the worst stats in the world, but at rare, you're hoping for a little bit more. So what do we got here? When this creature enters, target opponent reveals X cards from their hand, where X is the number of goblins you control. You choose one of those cards, that player exiles it. If an instant or sorcery card is exiled this way, you may cast it for as long as you control this creature, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. A lot of text here, so let's just step by step. And we'll go in the world where we imagine that this is the only goblin that you have in play when it entered. So, this enters the battlefield. Your opponent has like 5 cards in hand. They make a choice to reveal 1 card from their hand. In that case, that would be the choice of card that you only have 1 choice to pick. That gets exiled. And then if for whatever reason they didn't read the rest of the card and they let you, the card that they revealed was an instant or sorcery, you essentially drew that card into your hand for as long as Taster of Wares is around, and you can cast it using any color mana. Say they have 5 cards and you have 5 goblins, including this one on the battlefield. You get to see their whole hand. You get to choose which card to get rid of, at which point you're probably looking for an instant or sorcery. But, you know, if they've got some, you know, your thought seizing them. So if it's more important for you to get rid of their Kona or their Omniscience or whatever, then sure, get rid of that. How good is this actually? I forget the name of this card. It's called like Thought something. It's a creature. T creature, F standard, color equals black. Thoughtstalker Warlock. Very similar in stat or in mana cost. One less tough or one less power, but this has menace. If you didn't make them with Thoughtstalker Warlock, how Thoughtstalker Warlock reads is when it enters, choose an opponent. If they lost life this turn, then they reveal their whole hand. You choose the non-land card from it and they discard it. You don't get to gain the card or anything like that if it's an instant or sorcery. And then if they didn't lose any life, then you don't get to see their hand, they just discard a card. There's also Cruel Claws Heist. Black for sorcery. It says target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-land card from it, exile that card. And then you can also gift a card, which is give them, as the spell resolves, they get to draw a card. If you say that you're going to promise to gift them a card. And if the gift was promised, you may exile a card. You may exile the card that you chose to make them exile. Or you get to cast the card that you chose to them to exile. And you can use any mana spent to any mana of any color to spend to cast it. This to me kind of reads like Thoughtstalker, Thoughtstalker Warlock, and that card. You know, there's like a tier 2.5-ish lizard deck in standard. And they don't even play like that many main deck copies of Thoughtstalker Warlock. I don't really know where this fits. This is kind of the same sort of fail state as Thoughtstalker Warlock. They're basically just discarding a card. If this is the only goblin you have on the battlefield, they're just discarding a card of their choice. There's more hoops to jump through, but it ultimately ends up the same way. Here, I guess it always exiles as opposed to they're discarding, and maybe if they're a reanimator deck, maybe you feel very sad about it. I feel like your opponent losing any amount of life is easier to achieve to see their whole hand than you having enough goblins that are greater than or equal to the number of cards that they have in hand. So yeah, I just don't think this is all that good for standard. It kind of just is the same as a lot of other things that we've currently seen. It has this flashy ability of, you know, if you navigate yourself to the perfect situation, you can steal their removal spell or their card draw or whatever, and then you get to cast it later at some point, as long as you still have access or you still have Taster of Wares. But that's like a lot of hoops to jump through. And the body is just not that good for the mana cost. In limited, it's perfectly fine. This is a perfectly fine body. Just stripping any random card from your opponent's hand is fine. as an ETB. We see Ravenous Rat style effects at 2 mana be reasonable cards. Corrupted Court Official was what we had in Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is 1 more mana, but it's a lot more aggressive of a creature. So yeah, this is perfectly fine and limited. Not like a super high pick or anything like that, but you're not scoffing at this. But just not there in standard, I don't think. Twilight Diviner. For 2 and a black, we have a creature, Elf Cleric, at rare. It is a 3/3, so a very square creature. When it enters, Surveil 2. That's nice. Nice ETB. Whenever 1 or more other creatures you control enter, if they entered or were cast from a graveyard, create a token that's a copy of one of them. This ability triggers only once each turn. This is a weird card. I feel like it's designed for older formats. So they were entered or were cast from a graveyard. So cards from standard that you could cast from a graveyard. There's not Gravecrawler, Bloodghast. Bloodghast was in Aether Drift, was randomly reprinted in Aether Drift. That's something that can come from, that you can cast from a graveyard. There's the Hasty Warp creature that I think is very good, that you can also cast for its warp cast for its warp cost +2 life from a graveyard. Maybe the warp cost was just a single black and 2 life, but that's something that you can pull from a graveyard. Obviously, reanimation with this. You turn 3 this, surveil your reanimation target, turn 4, zombify this, or zombify something, get 2 copies of those things. Obviously, all very powerful stuff that you can do with this. I'm just trying to think where this goes. I don't really think that you would put this into your... Would you put this into a Superior Spider-Man list? Maybe. Well, no, not really. Because the Superior Spider-Man... Like, it kind of works, but not terribly. I guess it technically works, but not very well, right? Because when you cast Superior Spider-Man, the creature that you are initially reanimating, quote unquote, with Superior Spider-Man isn't actually coming from the graveyard. If you reanimate a Bringer of the Last Gift, then all the things that would come from the Bringer of the Last Gift, living end trigger, you would get to choose one random one of them to come back out. Or to get an extra copy of it. But in that case, it's kind of like very much win more. The ETB Surveil is nice. I guess if you Superior Spider-Man an Arden, the Arden isn't actually leaving your graveyard, but the next thing, the Arden trigger, creates something. You'd really need to make sure that the thing that you're bringing back out isn't legendary, because otherwise it's just gonna legend rule itself. But that's not terrible. You get two hasty menace lifelink demons from your Arden. In like the Dino Reanimator decks, the Foggy Swamp Visions versions, those don't actually, they're very similar to your Superior Spider-Man in that if you cast with Zombify, then sure, it works. But if you cast with Foggy Swamp Visions, the technical way that card works is you're exiling creatures from your graveyard and then creating token copies of them. So the creatures are not entering from your graveyard or being cast from your graveyard. You're just generating token copies of cards that you exiled. So I don't really know where this card plays. Other than like specifically Zombify and specifically you zombifying a non-legendary, or if it is a legendary, then something that has an ETB that you're fine with your token just instantly getting sacrificed. The other obvious place is small ball type stuff. Like I just said, with you play this with the Bloodghasts and with the warp creature that can come from your graveyard, or the what's the skeleton? Does the skeleton enter from your graveyard or does it go to your hand? Let me look. F standard CMC equals 1, color equals BT, skeleton. Forsaken Miner. Turn it from the graveyard to the battlefield. Yeah. So Forsaken Miner is another thing. Something like that, a little more small ball, a little more aggro. This could be very powerful in something like that. But I think the like big reanimator stuff that you're doing currently in standard, most of the time it's already legendary, or you're doing weird versions of reanimation that don't actually trigger this. In limited, I'd really have to look. I don't know if there's really anything in limited other than like Douse and Dawnglow or whatever that which is like the 5-mana reanimation spell at uncommon. I don't really think that there's a ton in the set that lets you cast things from your graveyard or reanimate things from your graveyard. So I don't know where this shows up in limited. 3 mana for a 3/3 that surveils too, like maybe you're fine with that in your elf deck, but you're not like windmill slamming this as pack one, pick one. You're like, okay, I'm already in elves. This is pick 5 or so. Yeah, sure. We'll pick it up. Boulder Dash is up next. Literally dashing on a boulder. For 1 and a red. We're in red now. For 1 and a red, we have a sorcery at uncommon. Boulder Dash deals 2 damage to any one target and 1 damage to any other target. So you can't target the same thing to make this be a lightning strike. You have to choose 2 different targets, but it's 2 and 1. Probably fine, to be honest. It says any target, it's not just target creatures, so you can deal... If there's only 1 creature on the battlefield, you choose whichever one kills it, and then point the rest of your opponent's face. And then if you ever get to kill 2 things with this, then you're like the happiest man in the world. Not likely to see any sort of standard play. At 2 mana, we already have Pyroclasm. At 3 mana, we have instant speed Pyroclasm with Fire Magic. But Unlimited could be very, very good. Brambleback Brute. For 2 and a red, we have a creature Giant Warrior at common. It is a 4/5. Obviously, it's going to have a downside. Yep, this creature enters with 2 -1/-1 counters. So it's a 3 mana 2/3. But you can pay 1 on a red to remove a counter from this creature. To have target creature can't block this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. I was a big fan of the uncommon Tylee from The Last Airbender, the red one that had the for 1 generic, target creature can't block. It wasn't only sorcery speed, and it wasn't tied to you being having counters to remove. Making only 1 creature not able to block can be powerful, but it's not nearly as powerful as making your creature unblockable. The bonus here is you're also growing this Brambleback Brute. But you're also having to spend 2 mana for this. Important thing to note is that the removing a counter is part of the cost. So for this one, as it's written. So if you have if you're holding up, deal 3, Tweeze, I think is what the bolt equivalent in this set is called. You need to do it in like their draw step or their upkeep or whatever, or if they don't activate this and they go to combat, then you need to do it then. You need to do it when they can't activate this, because if you're trying to shoot this in response to their activation, it's already going to be a 3/4. Just a little thing to think about there. I think it's fine. The 2 total mana to get rid of this or to activate this is a little on the expensive side. Growing the creature up so that it eventually becomes a 4/5 is fine, sure, but it's not free. You have to think that yes, you only spent 3 mana to start with on this creature, but to really get it to the point where it became a 4/5, you had to dump an additional 4 total mana into it. That puts you off of your curve if you've got a curve going, or it's just sitting around as nothing way later. You can't just use this at instant speed when you don't have anything else going on. You're holding up interaction. So yeah, I think it's just okay. Champion of the Path is up next. Here's our Elemental Champion card. For 3 and a red, we have a creature Elemental Sorcerer at rare. They are a 7/3 It has an additional cost to cast a spell, behold an elemental, and exile it. So we've already talked about what all that means. Whenever another elemental you control enters, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. And then it has the same, whenever this leaves, return the exiled card to its owner's hand. The stats are, it's a 7/3. That's huge. But it from a standard perspective is where I'm mostly thinking about this card right now. From a limited perspective, it's fine. I don't know if it's incredible. It's fine. But from a standard perspective, 3 toughness is so low. It's gonna die to nowhere to run. It's gonna die to lightning strike. It's gonna die to a bargained torch the tower. I just don't really see, even if there were some sort of elemental deck, I just don't really see this one doing much. It's certainly no Terror of the Peaks. And then in limited, the stat line is crazy, but it doesn't have any sort of evasion. I mean, you pick this early enough, then you can build your deck around it and just have a bunch of elementals and whatnot. But this 3 toughness does mean that your opponent will likely have some way to remove this just from like their common removal to get it off the battlefield and get it out of your way. So not as high on this as especially not as high on this as the Merfolk one that we saw, the 4/6, and definitely not as high on this as the elf that had the Beast Whisperer text on it. This is kind of closer to something like the Goblin, the Champion of the Weird. And then I don't even remember what the Kithkin was. It was a 4/5 that you could flash in. And then I don't remember the rest of the text on the Kithkin. I think this is one of the weaker ones for these champions. Cinder Strike is up next. For a single red, we have a sorcery at common. So this is the additional cost to cast a spell. You may blight 1. Cinder Strike deals 2 damage to target creature. It deals 4 damage to that creature instead if the spell's additional cost was paid. So to get it up to 4, you have to be able to blight. There's no like, or pay 3 colorless or whatever. Pay 4 total mana or whatnot. Otherwise, it's just Firebending Lesson. It's perfectly fine. I don't think it's. Maybe there's a world where it sees some standard play because it does deal with in a lot of the same ways it deals with what you call it. What's its face? Ouroboros, but it is sorcery speed. It does deal with an Ouroboros, even if your opponent was able to. Well, because it's sorcery speed, they would have been able to have it go for 1 turn. I think Seer, which we saw a couple streams ago, is probably more important for red in that Ouroboros matchup than this. But, you know, this is another option. And then in limited, this is perfectly fine red common removal. In the Blaze Epiphany. For X and a red, we have an instant at rare. It says, in Blaze Epiphany, deals X damage to target creature. So Blaze. Then, when that creature dies this turn, exile a number of cards from the top of your library equal to its power. Then choose a card exile this way. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Let me reread that again. So, the main part about this is that it is X and a red to deal X damage to a creature. And then whatever thing that you're killing, you get to exile a number of cards equal to the creature that died's power, but then only choose the best of one of them. And then until the end of your next turn, even though this is instant speed, you still get... even though this is instant speed, if you do, for whatever reason, want to use this at sorcery speed, you still have a whole next turn to gain access to that card. Maybe for like a control deck, I think that this might see some good play. You know, with a control deck, you're hitting your land drops more often. This is kind of a, especially if you're like an is it control deck. If you're not Jeskai, which I don't think that you're really playing an is it control deck in standard. You're probably just playing Jeskai. But let's say you are playing is it control and you need something that can deal with even your opponent's biggest threats, then this is a good option for you. And it's not just removal, because this is also letting you, it also kind of cycles for even more than that, because you're picking the best card out of the top whatever. It's not the top X, it's the top whatever you killed. If you had to use this to kill something kind of cheap, then you know you're still drawing something, and it is play. So it could, if you just had needed to kill your opponent's Ajani's Pridemate before it gets going crazy or whatever, or kill your opponent's Badgermole Cub, I guess is more realistic standard scenario, then you can still just get a land drop off the top of your deck for there. I think it's fine. I think when I first saw this, I thought it was sorcery speed, and I was like, no. But being instant speed, I think this is fine. You can sit there, hold up your counter magic. Let your opponent, if your opponent doesn't do anything big, you in Blaze Epiphany, basically guarantee kill something of theirs. And find the best card out of the top whatever of your library. Yeah. I kind of like it. In limited, it's mostly just a lot of the same reasons, or a lot of the same things, but you're going to be more fine with just putting this into your deck. Doesn't go face, so it's not quite like Choco Comet, but you're going to be fine putting this into your deck. Feed the Flames is up next. For 3 and a black, we have an instant at common. It says, Feed the Flames deals 5 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. This is your very typical black removal, or sorry, red removal at common. Pretty expensive, but kills most everything, and then also randomly has the Scorching Dragon Fire it gets exiled instead of just going to your opponent's graveyard. Giant Fall is up next for 1 and a red. We have an instant at uncommon. It says choose one. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls, or destroy target artifact. So Fall of the Hammer, which is basically just red's bite, or destroy target artifact. You know, the era of best of one once again shows its face. It's fine. Yeah, I mean it's a bite removal at instant speed. You're pretty happy about it. Plus you have the buyout later. If you need to deal with somebody's weird artifact. Reckless Ransacking for 1 and a red. We have an instant at common. Target creature gets +3/+2 until end of turn and create a treasure token. So not quite brute force. I can't remember what the color shifted. No, not brute force. Infuriate was, I think, what it was. Infuriate, I think, was for a single red. Target creature gets +3/+2 until end of turn. Technically, that's very similar to here, but you have to have 2 mana to start with, and then you get your 1 mana rebate on the treasure token. Important callback. Very late last stream, we saw that dragon that sort of had that feather ability, and I was thinking about Ancestor's Aid as something that you can kind of storm off with that dragon. This is another thing where you target your dragon with this. Because it's only a single target, you get to choose something else. It's not quite Feather, it's not quite Zada, where you don't get a billion extra copies of it, but this generating extra tokens extra treasures means you get the full mana value back for playing this. That's a crazy scenario, especially in limited, for you to get into that situation, but just keep an eye on it. In standard, this is not going to be there. And outside of that particular scenario for limited, this is fine. It's a fine combat trick. Yeah, it's just a fine combat trick, but not much to write home about. Scuzzback Scrounger for 1 and a red. We have a creature, Goblin Warrior at rare. I don't think I've seen this one. Oh no, I have seen this one. It's a 3/2, so 2 mana 3/2. That's all right. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may blight 1. If you do, create a treasure token. So you don't get to immediately blight 1 on the turn that you play this, which I think puts it down quite a bit. And it's during your main phase. If this was like an attack trigger, this would be very, very good because of Mobilize. But this being at the beginning of your first main phase means that you have to put it on something real. Maybe this in combination with something like the goblin that with the riot trigger that generates a token every time, or maybe in combo with House Squad Heavy, that thing generating a token over and over. You can kind of go off with it. And this is a goblin itself, even though it really doesn't look like a goblin. Yeah, maybe there's a world where this gets where this ends up seeing some play. Standard in a goblin deck specifically. Don't think it's gonna see play over any of the other red 2 drops that your traditional red aggressive decks are playing right now. But in a goblin deck, there's a world. Soul Immolation is up next for 3 red. Let me go back because I didn't really give my limited review of this. It's perfectly fine and limited. Could even be very good. High power and toughness to mana value. Generate treasure tokens. Kill off your creatures if you have any dies triggers or synergies with that. Any blight synergies you've got going on, you get stuff from that. Just a nice little role player. Anyways, back to Soul Immolation. For 3 red, we have a sorcery at Mythic. As initial cost to cast a spell, Blight X. X can't be greater than the greatest toughness among creatures you control. So you can't just go crazy and be like, I only have a 1/1, I'm going to Blight Infinity. 300 billion. Which just to talk about it, when you Blight, say you have Blight 2, you can choose something that has 1 toughness and it's perfectly fine. Because it doesn't care that it's able to hold those counters forever or hold all of them before dying. It's just, you're saying that thing is going to eat these two -1/-1 counters. So that's why they have to put this extra clause here, so that you have to name something that is reasonable for something of yours to take. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to put the blight. Say you have a 1/1 and an 0/7 on your board. You can say, all right, I want to blight 7 and then put all the counters on the 1/1. Because it doesn't say that you have to do that. But the max would be 7 in that case. Anyways. So what does it actually do? Soul Immolation deals X damage to each opponent and each creature they control. A one-sided wipe like that? Is that good enough in Standard? It's not really a control deck card because you have to blight, and you're probably not having that many creatures on the board. But this in like is just like a I'm thinking about where I'm thinking about this is in like what's the name of that snake? Rottenmouth Viper. In like a Rottenmouth Viper deck, you've got a bunch of little dorks that you're just trying to sacrifice. Maybe one of them lives. You have this Rottenmouth Viper that has 6 toughness. You go Soul Immolation for 6. Have one of your random little dorks that's just sitting around eat the 6. Dome your opponent for 6. Clear the way for the Rottenmouth Viper. Attack. Kill them off. Maybe that's a little too like pie in the sky, but I think that this is close because this hits face and because it doesn't hit your side other than one thing eating you're kind of like corpse exploding the one thing of yours. This isn't that far off, I don't think. In Limited, this is insane. This is like probably the best card in the set. One-sided board wipe. You're gonna have a bunch of random things of different powers and toughness. Dome your opponent for a bunch. likely wipe their board, if not kill most of their board and leave the rest of it very weak. This seems like a windmill slam. Pack one, pick one. Again, might be the best card in the set for limited. Obviously, it's not like... I say that in the same way that like it's a lot like Nibelheim Flame from Final Fantasy, where theoretically in the Final Fantasy set, if you draw Nibelheim Flame and you don't have a creature, right? If I remember how Nibelheim Flame was written, let me double check before I say something stupid. Nibelheim Flame. Yeah, it was just a Chandra's Ignition that you could buy back. I think the buyback was also very important to that card. But you know, theoretically, with your Nibelheim Flame, your Chandra's Ignition, stuff like that, you could just not have a creature on the board or whatever, and you rip it off the top of your deck, and you're like, I'm so sad. But like most of the time, you're just in 90% of the scenarios, you're going to have there's going to be a reasonable board state. You rip this off the top, and your opponent just dies that turn. So I think this is probably the best card in the set from a limited standpoint. Maybe sees play in standard, just because I think it's that good, and because it hits face. Soulbright Seeker is up next. For a single red, we have a creature elemental sorcerer at uncommon. It's a 2/1. There's a lot of Savannah Lions in this deck. Since I've been doing this full review, there's a number of 1-mana 2/1s. So maybe the format is a little faster than I think. But a lot of them have this same text where as initial cost to cast a spell, behold an elemental or pay 2. This is like they probably made a lot of these things, and I think there's one per main creature type because they want you to heavily incentivize being in a tribe, using one of the creature type synergies rather than just making some, you know, generic mid-range deck, because the having a number of Savannah Lions that have decent abilities heavily incentivizes you being in a full tribal deck. Anyways, let's keep reading the card. So as initial cost to cast a spell, behold an elemental or pay 2 generic. So you really want this to be in a tribal deck, because 3 mana for a 2/1, not very playable. And then for a single red, target creature you control gains trample until end of turn. If this is the third time this ability has resolved, add 4 red. So red, 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 red. I think this is a play on... There was some effect that had the same weird, like, if this is the third time it's resolved, you get a bunch of extra mana, or you get your mana back plus a little bit of extra. That one was like 2 generic, and then it turned into like 8 or something red, something like that. This being only 1 red, you kind of get to go... You play this early, and then when you get to turn 3, you can kind of play a 4-drop, and then elementals care about playing 4 power or 4 mana value spells. Important thing to know. Well, no, no, actually, important thing to know is if you have 3 mana, If you're trying to do that, you're on, it's turn 3 and you have 3 mana, red mana available, and you're trying to go red. You're trying to activate this a bunch of times. If your opponent, in response to one of these activations, as long as it's not already the third one, kills whatever you're targeting. If you're targeting the same thing over and over again, then one of those resolutions will fizzle, and so you won't get the mana from this. So if you're in that situation and you're worried about your opponent fizzling this, if you have multiple creatures, target each of them. Obviously, it's designed where you don't really want to target the same thing over and over, but just realize if like this is the only creature you have on the board and you're like, okay, hey, I'm gonna do this fun thing and just press this button a bunch so that I can get 4 mana, and your opponent just shoots it, you're really boned in that situation because you kind of cut yourself off from mana. You're playing off curve, and yeah, you're playing off curve in the early game when you really want to be playing on curve for no real value. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, I do think that this is a decent card. Savannah Lions in the early game, apply pressure early. Later on, you can use this to sort of both give your big elementals, which typically are 4+ drops, the ability to trample over your opponent, and you get some mana back to cast more 4 drops for your elemental deck. Not really something that I think would see standard play. Sting Slinger. For 2 and a red, we have a creature, Goblin Warrior. Another weird looking goblin. At uncommon, it's a 3/3. So 3/3 for 3. Alright stats. For 2 and a red, tap and blight 1. This creature deals 2 damage to each opponent. Yeah, sure. It doesn't say anything about activate only as a sorcery or whatever. Yeah. If this is your only creature, you can only do it 3 times, but you know, this is a way to close out a game that's gotten into a board stall. Seems like a pretty good pick. 2 mana is a little expensive for that, but you are dealing 2. And it's repeatable, so yeah. Seems like a good card. Sting Slinger. Not constructed playable, but pretty good and limited. Whew. And take a sip of soda, and then we'll get on to Gilt-Leaf's Embrace. Tuna green for an enchantment aura at common. It has flash. Enchant creature. When this aura enters, enchanted creature gains trample and indestructible until end of turn, and enchanted creature gets +2/+0. 3 mana for this effect. It is in green, which is interesting. Green, well, I was going to say green typically doesn't get this effect, but that's literally not true. We saw Origin of Metal Bending have this, but that was at 2 mana. This just doesn't seem... 3 mana is so expensive for this type of, like, save your creature effect. I think pretty clearly that they are wanting you to kind of like use this offensively. Your opponent makes their blocks. You flash this in to give your creature that would have traded indestructible, pump it up enough so that it guarantees kills your opponent's thing and maybe even tramples over for a little bit. But even all that, that's 3 mana, and it's not even give you like any toughness. I guess the indestructibility is to make up for the fact that you don't get any toughness on it. I don't know. 3 mana is a lot. I feel like this is pretty weak. If it was 2 mana, there'd be more to talk about. I guess they wanted to say 3 mana because this is a full-on aura instead of just, you know, like a temporary save your creature thing, or a combat trick like a +3/+3 or whatever. But it doesn't even like permanently give your creature trample. Yeah, this does not seem like a very good card. Alana Dignitary. For 1 and a green, we have a creature Elf Advisor at uncommon. It's a 2/3 that has as additional cost to cast a spell, Behold an Elf, or pay 2 generic. So a 2 mana 2/3 is fine. A 4 mana 2/3 is a little on the expensive side. Now, what does it actually do? You can tap it to add 2 green, activate only if there's an elf card in your graveyard. So it's a really good mana dork, but it's an inconsistent mana dork. But I think, given the fact that it's just a 2/3 to begin with, means that you're probably just fine. Even if you're not able to tap it for mana, you would love to be able to tap it for mana. But it is just a 2/3. It is going to sit there and block very well, or even attack pretty well. And then once you turn it on by either milling or them shooting something else, or you're blocking with an elf or whatever, then the party starts. I think this is a pretty good card. Don't think it's anywhere standard playable. Maybe like you can go turn 1 Llanowar Elf, turn 2 this, but then you still have to find a way to get an elf into your graveyard to actually turn this on. And you could just play a Badgermole Cub. I guess if you're actually trying to do the elf thing, then this potentially gets played over Badgermole Cub, but that's just you trying to be cute more than you trying to make a good deck. Yeah, I think that this is mostly a limited card. Moon Vigil Adherence. For 2 green, we have a creature Elf Druid at uncommon. It is a 0/0 with trample, and this creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control and each creature card in your graveyard. Hey, we were thinking about Meek Attack earlier. This is a pretty good Meek Attack target, because in your hand, this is not star, this is 0/0. So in your hand, this is a creature with total power and toughness 5 or less. And it has trample itself. So you turbo mill yourself, then you Meek Attack with this. Now there's a lot of hoops that you're going through to get a lot of things in your graveyard Though it is also creatures you control, which is kind of the fail state of, if this is the only thing that you have, it's at least going to be a 1/1, because it counts itself as a creature that you control. But yeah, here's a fine meek attack target in the actual set itself. So if you do draft meek attack, look to pick something like this up. Otherwise, just playing this randomly, it's probably fine. 4 mana for... You're in elves, so you are milling yourself. Plus just normal gameplay. Creatures are going to be on the battlefield or in your graveyard. It's probably going to end up being pretty big. And the fact that it has trample is very important for a card like this. So yeah, it's probably a pretty good pickup for your elf deck in Limited. Yeah, Moon Vigil Adherence. Prismatic Undercurrents is up next for 3 and a green. We have an enchantment at uncommon. It has Vivid, and this says when this enchantment enters, search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. Reveal those cards, put them into your hand, then shuffle. So that seems pretty rough. But it also says you may play an additional land on each of your turns. So for the most part, this is kind of like 4 mana ramp. You do have a little, if you are Vivid, it can get a lot better because you're essentially drawing a bunch of cards. It's land cards, but you are drawing, but you are putting those cards into your hand. And then as this thing sticks on the battlefield, those cards that you drew, or those lands that you drew, you get to double play them out. And the important thing to think about with this is, even if this is the only green, or if this is the only color permanent on the battlefield, it will ramp you at least 1, as long as your opponent does not have instant speed enchantment removal, which would be really insane to think about. Your opponent just sort of thinking, oh, I'm going to play around my opponent on turn 4 playing Prismatic Undercurrents, and I'm going to hold up my disenchant. But I do have to say it because that is a situation where this doesn't actually ramp you anything. As long as that Vivid trigger resolves before this thing leaves the battlefield, you will be able to at least ramp 1. Now, all that to say, 4 mana for not even like an explosive vegetation. Sure, the upside of if you have like 3 different... I think this only becomes even close to playable, I think, if you have 3+ colors already. I guess including this. Because you get your ramp that turn plus quote unquote draw 2 more cards that you could then keep, that if this survives a whole turn, you get to go all the way up to 7 mana. but you're already at 4 to get this on the battlefield. And then you went to 5 on the same turn. And you went to 7. Like, that's basically the exact same as explosive vegetation, but you don't have the guarantee that you're getting immediately the 2 lands of ramp from something like an explosive vegetation. Or reach the horizon, if we're thinking about a card that was at uncommon in a recent set. I just don't see this card being that good. Oh, yeah, later, as the game goes later and later and later, right? You still have the ability to double land, but you're eventually going to be running out of cards in your hand, running out of lands in your hand, and then you're just playing lands off the top of your deck, and you're not getting that much. And then also, once you get to a certain amount of mana, you don't really need that much more. Maybe you can double, maybe it leaves you to be able to double spell or something like that. But there's kind of, the value of mana starts plateauing the higher it gets. So I feel like this is way worse than explosive vegetation. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I'll have to look back through the set. I know that there is at least one 3 mana, you know, mana ramp, Precious Wanderings thing out there. And we've seen, I know that there's the 2 mana Tree Folk. We just saw the Elf. I feel like that there's way better ramp options than this. I just don't really see it. Maybe I'm mistaken somewhere, but I just don't really see it. Pummeler for Hire is up next. For 4 and a green, we have a creature, Giant Mercenary at uncommon. It is a 4/4 with Vigilance and Reach. So 5 mana for a 4/4, Vigilance, Reach, and Ward 2. Seems great and limited already. When it enters, you gain X life, where X is the greatest power among giants you control. This card is insane. In limited, and not in standard. In limited, but this card's ridiculous. Power is a little on the low end, but like I'm comparing this to something like a Balam T-Rexar, which sure, I think Balam T-Rexar or like Honey Mammoth or some things like that. Well, a Honey Mammoth was like a 6/4, I think. Balam T-Rexar is like the best version of that type of a card that you're gonna see. This does have Vigilance, Reach, and Ward 2. They're going to have a difficult time getting this off the battlefield, and it's going to at least gain you 4 life. I mean, in 90% of scenarios, if your opponent has a billion mana open and enough so that they have enough to kill this and pay the ward that while the trigger's on the stack and you have no other giants, then sure, you didn't gain any life in that scenario. But that's a very, very narrow scenario, I think. This card seems very, very good in draft. Safe Right Cavalry is up next. For 3 and a green, we have a creature Elf Warrior at common. It's a 4/4. Can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, so can't be gang blocked. And for 5 generic, target elf you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. It itself is an elf. Seems fine. Maybe even a little bit better than fine. Maybe like a C+-ish. 4 mana is... You're not going to want a ton of these, but I think you'd be fine with like one of them. And threat of activation as the game goes late. You're threatening to have this hit for 6 or instant speed pump up something, another elf that you have. Yeah. I think this card seems pretty good. Pretty good and limited. Spry and Mighty is up next. For 4 and a green, we have a sorcery at rare. Choose 2 creatures you control. You draw X cards, and the chosen creatures get +X/+X, and gain trample until end of turn, where X is the difference between the chosen creature's powers. Trying to think. So like in standard, there's like Toby. That it's like the 1/1 that creates a 4/4 that like can't attack alone. You're really looking for those type of scenarios where you have something that creates a token where the token and the original thing have drastically different powers and toughness. Obviously, you can just play like random cards. You're curving up, whatnot. But I'm mostly thinking about it where you only need 1 card to be able to put yourself in a good position with this. It is sorcery speed. You're choosing, which is way better than targeting, because then your opponent can't really interact with this in the best way. They can kill, I guess it doesn't say to choose 2 of not the same creature. I think that makes it so that it doesn't fizzle if your opponent shoots one of your things, but it basically fizzles. Because you would have to say you only have one. You cast this. You have 2 creatures on the battlefield. Your opponent, in response, kills one of your creatures. That difference between powers is just 0 because you have to choose the same creature. It's not a playable card. I'm just trying to think of in standard. I'm just trying to think of like weird scenarios. 5 mana for all this is too much. Too much for all this. There's a lot of fun effects going on here. You can draw a lot of cards. You're getting trample, so you can kind of get some stuff done. But 5 mana is a lot of mana. In limited, this is probably very good. You're generally going to have a board state of random creatures of random power and toughnesses. You probably do want to have... Where would I be fine with this? X is equal to 2. 5 mana, draw 2, give 2 creatures +2/+2 and trample. Yeah, I think that would be fine. Once you get to 3 and up, then I think you're ecstatic. But yeah, not really standard playable. And there's obviously the bad fail state for this, but in most generic scenarios, this is going to... Well, we'll have to see it play out. I imagine in most generic scenarios, you're going to be able to get 2 cards, at least 2 cards off of this, and then give... at least let one of your things crash in against your opponent for a lot of damage. The thing that was already big. Spry and Mighty. Wildvine Pummeler is up next for 6 and a green. We have a creature, Giant Berserker, at common. It is a 6/5 with Vivid. This spell costs 1 generic less to cast for each color among permanents you control, and it has Reach and Trample. Excuse me. So where would I be fine with this? Four and a green or 6/5. This is a as you cast it, so a lot of the times with the Vivid cards, you can count the color of the card that you play as part of its Vivid, so it's going to be at least 1. But this is part of the cast, so you have to have 2 colors already on the battlefield in order to get the reduction. It's not just 1 and then this counts itself as it's on the stack. That doesn't work. Yeah, I think 4 and a green. I'm pretty happy about this. If I got the 3 and a green, yeah, I think I'd really prioritize this if I'm pretty confident that I can get 3 colors on the battlefield. Now, this is one of those cards where maybe there's a world. So, whenever you think about these Vivid cards, there is a card called Leyline of the Guild Pact in the standard right now, which is a ley line, which means that if it's in your opening hand, you can put it on the battlefield for free at the start of the game. And it says each non-land permanent you control is all colors, and then each land you control taps for all colors of mana. And that's a card that had seen play in Modern in combination with things like Territorial Kavu and Scion of Draco. They call it Domain Zoo. And that card is legal in Standard. So if I have that, if I cut this down by 5, there is a world where this sees play in Standard. Now, I don't know how many other Vivid stuff there are going on, but maybe this is like a Modern card. You Leyline of the Guild Pact. You have a 2 mana 6/5 Reach Trample. That's going to kill people pretty quick. It doesn't even get hit by unlike Territorial Kavu, which is an actual 2 mana value creature. This does not get hit by Fatal Push. But yeah, this might be a Modern card more than a Standard card. I'd have to really look to see what other Vivid stuff there are and how well that it works with something like Land of the Guild Pact. In limited, I think you're shooting for 3 colors to pick this up. If you feel like you can consistently get 3 colors on the battlefield, then I would start prioritizing this. If you only think you can get 2 colors, then this is fine. Not insane, but yeah. Wildvine Pummeler. And on to our multicolors. First one up is Boggart Curse Crafter. For a black and a green, a black and a red, we have a creature Goblin Warlock at uncommon. It is a 2/3 with Death Touch. It's already pretty good stat line. Whenever another goblin you control dies, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. So, sort of a Blood Artist effect. No drain on this one, but sign, as they call it, signpost uncommon for your goblin deck. If you see this wheeling around, then look to be in goblins, because nobody else is picking them up. Would this be playable in standard? In a standard goblin deck? Maybe. If you're doing like Goblin Sacrifice, maybe. I don't know if it gets you that much more than just playing the 2-mana vampire thing that gives you that actually drains. Other than the fact that this is a goblin, and maybe, you know, you've got a goblin lord on the battlefield as well, so you get a little bit more out of that, but probably mostly a limited card, and probably a pretty good limited card at that. Catharsis. Here is our Boros version of one of these elementals. This is actually going to be the first time we're going to see Evoke, so we can talk about what Evoke is. For 4 Boros. And yesterday I would go into all the different combinations. We'll just say 4 Boros. We have a creature elemental incarnation at Mythic. It is a 3/4 that has, when this creature enters, if white was spent to cast it, create 2 1/1 green and white Kithkin creature tokens. And then when this creature enters, if red was spent to cast it, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn. And then it has Evoke for Boros. So Evoke is, you can cast this for its Evoke cost, but it enters the battlefield and immediately puts a sacrifice trigger on the stack. So in most scenarios, it's just going to go away immediately. There's tricks that you can do. You blink it. You play a Not Dead After All while that sacrifice triggers on the stack in order to get the thing back. They call that scamming it. Scamming these effects into play. The important part about these specific elementals is that you doing that doesn't really help you a ton, because you're not re-triggering their enters triggers, because you had to have spent mana of those particular colors as listed on those 2 ETB triggers in order to get the effect. So this is the scam decks were terrors in modern, and led to a number of bans of a set of Modern Horizons 2 Evoke elementals, Grief, Fury, stuff like that. But there's still even cards like Solitude, Subtlety, Endurance that still see play and still get scammed. this allows you to make more of these evoke elementals without turbocharging those scam decks with more fodder. Now, where does this card see play? 6 mana in Boros. That's a little on the expensive side. But if I could see this if I were just trying to be a mid-rangey, a Boros mid-rangey deck, this is pretty powerful, right? Sure, it's 6 mana for a 3/4, but it's really 6 mana for a 3/4 with 2 1/1s that all get +1/+1 in haste. So you're attacking with a 4/5 and 2 2/2s. Eight, 9 worth of power and toughness. The turn that you play this, that's going to kill people. But 6 mana is a lot of mana in standard, and this doesn't have green in it, is what I'm trying to get to. So you're not really ramping into this. But this is one of the ones where I think that the actual evoke side of this, both of them are perfectly fine. So I already talked a little bit about the Boros tokens deck. This is just another in a long line of things that you can token out. And well, one of the things that those token decks often would play is a card called Imidane's Recruiter. I don't know if this fully replaces Imidane's Recruiter, but being able to give your team that maybe you powered out +1/+1 in haste can allow you to swing for lethal way ahead of schedule. So I could see this see play. It's not going to fully replace like your resolute reinforcements or whatever, because it's white. But just having the buyout of a raise the alarm, and then having the buyout of an Imidane's Recruiter, both of those are perfectly reasonable. And then just having this in your deck as something where, hey, you flood out, this comes out, you're flooding out. Often with those decks, if you're flooding out, you kind of don't have anything huge to come back with. Well, this is a huge thing to come back with. So I could see this see play in standard. For limited, an incredible card. This is one where you really would feel pretty bad about not casting it for its full cost, because the buyouts are just fine in limited, but it's not compared to standard, where you might have 4 copies of these in your deck. You're probably going to have 0 copies of this in your deck, but in a random samplings of deck, there's going to be decks, there's going to be 0 copies of this. But if you happen to have it, you're going to want to wait till you get 6 mana, because the buyouts aren't kill something. It's just, make a couple little dorky 1/1s or pump your team. Like maybe if you're at a spot where you can go for lethal, then sure, do the red and try and kill them. But if you can't go for actual lethal, then just wait until you get to 6 mana. Deep Channel Duelist is up next. For white and a blue, we have a creature, Merfolk Soldier, at uncommon. It's a 2/2. It says at the beginning of your end step, untap target Merfolk you control, and other Merfolk you control get +2/+2. 2 mana Merfolk Lord, that's pretty good. Very gonna be a pretty high pick in limited. It's your signpost uncommon for being in the Merfolk deck. It works well with Convoke. You're basically getting a little bit of extra mana. It's also pseudo vigilance, I suppose. If you can't do any Convoke stuff. But yeah, Deep Channel Duelist, pretty good card. Possibly even standard playable if you're able to put together an Azorius Merfolk deck. Again, I think the existing Merfolk decks have mostly been Simic. Maybe you can go full Bant, given how good the mana is going to be in upcoming standard. But we'll see. Dream Harvest is up next for 5 Dimir, so 7 total mana. We have a sorcery at rare. It says each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they have exiled cards with total mana value 5 or greater this way. Until end of turn, you may cast cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. This is very commander coded. It's an each opponent thing. It scales with the more opponents that you have, and becomes significantly better in commander. But let's just think about it as a 1v1 constructed card. 7 mana is a lot. You either get a bunch of small stuff that you can all cast at whatever order, in whatever order, at whatever point during your turn. It's not like you have to immediately put them all on the stack like you would with like something like an Atali. Because it says until end of turn. Or if you hit their big thing, you only get one big thing, but it's a big thing that you're hitting, and so it's probably going to be good that you get to cast it for free. It doesn't say specifically non-creature or anything. It also, important to know, it's not reveal cards until you reveal a number of cards with total mana value X or greater. It's you're exiling from the top of their deck until you've hit that. So you're also pseudo milling them with this. That's not that important in standard. 60 cards is a lot to get through, but in limited, that's not horror, or that's not completely insignificant to point out. You will eat a lot of their deck. You will likely eat a lot of their deck. You don't get to play any lands from your opponent's side by casting this. I think the biggest thing is 7 mana is just so much. If you get to cast this in limited, you won the game. Almost certainly. For standard, like, I've got this versus like Jeskai Revelation. I'd much rather just do Jeskai Revelation. If I'm Dimir control, like, there's just do the mill stuff. Just cast your Singularity Rupture and then play your card that mills them for the rest. This is just commander coded. I think in all formats. too expensive for limited. It'll win a game in limited, but often it'll just rot in your hand in limited. So I wouldn't pick it that high unless you're very, very confident that you can drag the game super late. And then standard, there's just better things to be doing. So very commander coded. Eclipsed Boggart. We have a Rakdos Goblin Scout at uncommon. It's a 2/3, and it says when this creature enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a goblin, a swamp, or a mountain from among them, and put it into your hand. Only one of those. You have to choose which one you get. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Not much to say here. Look back real quick. Oh, no, never mind. For some reason, I thought that I missed a card that I thought we hadn't seen. Not much to say here. There's a whole cycle of these cards, one for each of the supported creature types. They're all like 3 colored pips of either of that tribe's color, plus some amount of extra mana, because the power and toughness changes across them. They're all perfectly fine. They all basically draw you a card when they enter. The power and toughness here is not great, but it is ETB. Draw bait either a goblin or make sure that you keep hitting your land drops. Yeah, the best of the top 4 of your deck. And yeah, so pretty good pick. Don't know how high of a pick it is. The stats are pretty low, but it's probably fine. Here's Eclipsed Elf. Not going to say much more about this. This is everything that we just said about the goblin, except it's swamp and forest and elf instead of goblin, mountain, and swamp. And this one's a 3/2, so a little more aggressively statted. Hey, look who it is. It's Eclipsed Kifkin. This is only 2 mana for a 2/1. So I think probably a little bit better than the others, just because you can cast a little bit earlier. Makes it so that you're keeping a 2-lander and Eclipsed Kifkin is much more reasonable. Or is a pretty reasonable line to go. And then Eclipsed Marrow. Literally the same as the Goblin. The same stat line, the same cost, except it's in Azorius. Feisty Spikeling is up next. For 1 and a Boros, we have a creature shapeshifter at common. It's a 2/1 that has, during your turn, this creature has first strike. We've seen this type of card a number of times over the years. I think back in War of the Spark, or one of the Guilds of Ravnica block cards. There was a Boros Legion card that was like this. Like first year recruit or something like that. This is a changeling, so this is one of your, hey, I need something I need a curve filler for my Goblin deck or my Kifkin deck. Here you go. Mischievous Sneakling for 1 and a Dimir. Hey, we have a 2/2 with Flash. Sure. A lot of the same things that I said about the Spikeling is what you're going to say here. Morkant's Loyalist is up next. For 1, a black and a green, we have a creature elf warrior at uncommon. It is a 3/2. It's a lord, so other elves you control get +1/+1. And when this creature dies, return another target elf card from your graveyard to your hand. This one's pretty good. 3 mana, compare it to the Merfolk one, which was 2 mana. But if this dies, which they're probably going to be pointing removal at this, so it's likely going to die, you get to cash it in for something else. It does say another, so you can't just pick itself back up. But you're in elves, you're probably self-milling. So you probably have something to pick back up. So seems pretty good. Your opponent has to use removal to get rid of it, and you're not even down a card. So seems like a very good pick. The Signpost Elf Uncommon, as they say. Raiding Schemes is up next. For 3, a red and a green, we have an enchantment at rare that says each non-creature spell you cast has Conspire. This is a old mechanic, I think, from the original Lorwyn. This is the only instance of this mechanic, so it's good that they spell it all out for you, because I don't even know what it is. So as you cast a non-creature spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share a color with the spell. When you do, copy it, and you may choose new targets for the copy. A copy of a permanent spell becomes a token. It does say non-creature, but that doesn't mean non-permanent, so it could be an enchantment or something like that. Seems pretty good. Lots of card advantage, as long as you have the creatures on the board that you can add to the effect of the non-creature spell. And it's part of the cast cost, essentially. So you'll get the copy as you cast the original. Is 5 mana for doing nothing. So I think ultimately this is pretty commander coded. And in limited, the majority of your deck is going to be creatures, especially in Gruul. So I don't really know how good this is going to be in limited either. Like, you can certainly try and draft a deck that takes advantage of something like this, but feels very commander coded to me. Not much else to say. Raiding Schemes. Reaping Willow is up next. For 1, Orzhov. So that's 4 total mana. We have a creature, Treefolk Cleric, at uncommon. It is a 3/6 with lifelink, but it does enter with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. So it's entering as a 1/4 with lifelink. Then it says, for 1 in Orzhov, remove 2 counters from this creature. Return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. This seems pretty good. Just kind of sits there. 4 mana's not that expensive. Sits there, blocks, does whatever. Your opponent, if your opponent, either your opponent feels like they need to remove this before they can kill some random 3-drop, or they feel incentivized to kill this because you do have some 3-drops in your graveyard that you can bring back. It's a great blight target. to pile on to start bringing more stuff of yours back. This seems like a pretty good card. It's pretty slow, kind of meandering card, kind of a value engine, but it's pretty powerful. And even if you only do it once, you do end up with just a 3/6 with lifelink. That's going to keep you in the game for a long time, unless they find a way to remove it. So I really like Reaping Willow. Not a standard level card, but pretty good and limited. Shadow Urchin is up next for 2 and a Rakdos. We have a creature Oof, another Oof at rare. It's a 3/4, so 3 mana for a 3/4. That's already decently statted. Whenever this creature attacks, blight 1. It's not a may, you have to. Whenever a creature you control with 1 or more counters on it dies, exile that many cards from the top of your library. So that many equaling the number of counters on it. Until your next instep, you may play those cards. Not for free, it's just drawing them. It also doesn't say specifically if a creature with 1 or more -1/-1 counters. So even something like a Zac Fair, it technically dies with its +1/+1 counter on it when you sacrifice it. I think, let me double check so I'm not lying to you. Let's look at Zac. I think it's with an H. No, it must be with a K. Zac with a K. Zac Fair. Yeah, it's not part of the cast. Oh, it's not part of the cost of you sacrificing it to give something indestructible. So it died with a +1/+1 counter on it, so you would be able to exile the top card of your library and play that until your next instep. It is only next instep. It's not until next turn. I think I might have said until the end of your next turn. Seems okay. It fuels itself, but if you're wanting to get a lot of value out of this, you're going to need to have other things on the board. I guess you can put just 1 counter on this, and then if they go to kill it, but then you're kind of nerfing this thing. It seems okay. I'm not so sure that this is all that great, unless you have really fancy stuff that you're doing. Like, you're in, you know, it works pretty well with, well, it works okay. I shouldn't say it works pretty well. It works okay with Servandum and Amalia and stuff like that. With Ajani's Pridemate, stuff like that. Because you're not drawing the cards, you're just impulse drawing them, and you only have access to them for that one turn. Even if you exile like a billion cards, you're probably not going to have enough mana to play all of them, and since it's not drawing, it's just going away. Sure, you get the best of the top there, but you are kind of in an embarrassment of riches situation. So I don't know, not so sure about this on the standard side. From limited side, this is obviously pretty good. You blight something, maybe you kill it with the blight. You just sort of get instant card draw with it by killing something off with it. Just need to make sure that you're going to attacks before you play your land, so that you can get value off of that, off of lands that you pull off the top of your deck. But yeah, seems like a pretty good limited card. Could be good in standard, but I feel like there's a lot of value engine stuff at 3 mana already. And this one's, you got to jump through a little more hoops than some of the other stuff that's already out there. Stoic Grove Guide is up next for 4 and a Golgari. 5 total mana. We have a creature elf druid at common. It's a 5/4. So 5 mana, 5/4. For 1 and a Golgari, and exile this card from your graveyard. Create a 2/2 black and green elf creature token. You can only do it at sorcery speed. Is fine top end for an elf deck. Well, actually, I think I shouldn't say as a top end. It's you more want this card to be milled. Like if you play it, you can play it from your hand, and it's a decently statted card, and then later you get to cash it in. But I think more to the point is you just want to mill this at some point, and then have this cheap creature to bring back from your graveyard as sort of pseudo card advantage. I don't know how highly I'm picking these. Maybe I have I'm fine with one of them in my my elf deck in limited. But yeah, Stoic Grove Guide. Tristan's Command. So here's our Golgari, or an elf command. And it's actually the first time that we're seeing Kindred this stream. So we'll talk about that in a second. For 4, a black and a green, we have a Kindred Sorcery Elf. So Kindred is the same as Tribal from the original Lorwyn block. All that this means is in any instance where you where you can consider this an elf, it's an elf. So if you need to behold a card from your hand, if you need to behold an elf, you can you can behold this. If you have cast triggers that care about you casting elves, this. If you have elves in your graveyard, and this is in your graveyard, that counts. So, if it was a permanent, which this is not, but if it was like a Kindred enchantment, and you had something where it's like, hey, if you have another elf on the battlefield, get some extra value, then that would count. So, it's a Kindred Sorcery Elf for 4 black and a green. And it has choose 2. Like all commands, it has choose 2. And like all of the commands in this cycle, one of the options is create a token that's a copy of target creature type, in this case, elf you control. Or you can, another option is return 1 or 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. Destroy target creature or enchantment. And creatures target player controls gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Untap them. The untap them part is important because your elves, right? You're tapping your elves for mana, tapping your Llanowar elves, and whatever else you have, probably to help cast this, and then they get to untap to be part of the attack. 6 mana is a lot. You are in elves, so it is going to feel cheaper than, or you're going to be able to play it sooner than something like the Goblin one, which was 5 mana. It does have one decent buyout option of, hey, this is just a pretty expensive removal spell. And then also returning permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. If your opponent has been trying to kill your lords and stuff like that, then this is a fun way, or this helps you refill your hand. 6 mana is quite a bit, though. The overrun is fine. Doesn't give any evasion or trample, so it's not literal overrun. I think I would like it more if it was a literal overrun. This is close to playable in an elf deck. I don't know how playable it is outside of an elf deck. Maybe. Maybe just in like a go garbage deck. Top end value card in a Golgari ramp or Golgari control list. I think it's fine. I think it's better than a lot of the other ones we've seen. In limited, it's pretty good. 6 is a lot of mana. If you can get to the point where you can cast this, it's pretty darn good. It is sorcery speed, which is more important for the constructed side. But if you can cast it, you're going to very often win that game. But it is 6 mana, so you might just die before you get the chance to even use it. So just keep that in mind. Twin Flame Travelers. For 2, a blue and a red, we have a creature elemental sorcerer at uncommon. It's a 3/3 with flying, so 4 mana 3/3 flying. That's already okay. If a triggered ability of another elemental you control triggers, it triggers an additional time. So Panharmonicons for elementals. I mean, we do know that a lot of the elementals have like mana value 4 or greater triggers. Is a 4/4 flying Panharmonicon for elementals good enough? I don't know. This will be fun and interesting to play around in limited, to draft around in limited, to see if it's that good. We saw with Katara, the rare Katara from Avatar, in limited specifically, it's doing okay in the standard, but in limited specifically, those cards weren't that great. They were 3 mana 3. They were 3 different colored pips for 3/3s. But a Panharmonicon for allies wasn't really that great, that playable. Didn't have a good win rate according to 17 lands. This is much easier to cast. It's also a much better body. That Katara was just a 3/3 sack of potatoes. This one's a flyer. Is 1 more mana. I think the fact that it's much more relevant, it's a much more relevant body, being a 3/3 flyer, does make it a little bit better. But I think it's still a wait and see moment here on whether or not this ends up being win more, or if it's a linchpin of being able to go enough over the top with your high cost elemental deck to get the job done. Don't really think that it's going to be standard playable. Whew. And now we are to our artifacts, which is where we left off last stream. We at nearly 3.5 hours get back there, but we don't have a ton left to go. If I'm looking at the cards here, what is that? 16 more cards to go, and enough. 5 of them are going to be very, very quick to talk about. So, Chronicle of Victory. For 6 generic mana, we have a legendary artifact at Mythic. As Chronicle of Victory enters, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +2/+2 and have first strike and trample. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, draw a card. Very commander coded card. Kind of Vanquisher's Banner, Coat of Arms, you know, a lot of different versions of this type of card. This one's combining the you know, Beast Whisperer, card draw with the mass pump here. Giving your creatures first strike and trample is super nice. The pump's only +2/+2 compared to a lot of those other cards. 6 mana is really expensive. This doesn't feel like a standard card at all. This feels like a commander card. In limited, I think ends up being a lot like what we just talked about with the elf command. If you can cast this card, this is going to win you a ton of games, but it's 6 mana. It could just be rotting in your hand as you get rushed down by an aggressive deck. And it remains to be seen on how fast the format is. So yeah, if the format is any sort of slow, this is probably incredible. If the format is very fast, then this is probably not that good. Because even more than I think the elf command. The elf command at least kills something when you cast it. This one, it doesn't create any body or anything. It's just pumps. You get value later. It's just a mass pump plus eventual value later. So probably on the lower end, but you will see people play it, and it will win games. But just keep in mind that it is 6 mana for not affecting the board in any way. Dawn Blessed Pendant, or single generic. We have an artifact at uncommon. And as this artifact enters, choose elemental, elf, fairy, giant, goblin, kithkin, merfolk, or treefolk. So those are all the relevant creature types in Lorwyn. Whenever a permanent you control of the chosen type enters, you gain 1 life, and then pay 2 generic, tap, and sacrifice this to return target card of the chosen type from your graveyard to your hand. I think this is fine. I think you're fine with one of these. It's cheap enough that you can just sort of like play it super early, or just, you know, squeeze it in when you have to play off curve in order to just gain a little bit of life over the course of playing your deck. You're very likely going to be one of these tribes, one of these kindreds in your limited deck. And then later on, you can, when you don't, the life gain is no longer relevant, your opponent got rid of your bomb, or you played your command, or you want to get your nameless inversion back, or whatever have you, you can cash this in to pick that thing back up and reuse it later. And it's not at sorcery speed or anything like that, so you can just hold it up and use it on your opponent's end step. I'd be fine with just with one of these in my deck. Not sure it's a high pick, but it's not a bad pick. Feardock Core, for 3 generic. We have a Kindred Artifact Shapeshifter at common. It's a changeling, so it's a kindred of every type. And you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, and then for 4 generic, this artifact becomes a 4/4 artifact creature until end of turn. That is still a creature that is of every type. 4 mana for a mana rock. not great. And it doesn't even like help with vivid. It helps you cast your spells if you're trying to be 3 or 4 colors, but it doesn't help with like your triggering or adding colors to your vivid. Don't think that this is that high of a pick. Foraging Wickermaw is up next. For 2 generic, we have an artifact creature Scarecrow at common. It's a 1/3 that when it enters, surveil 1. And then you can pay 1 generic to add 1 mana of any color. So it's one of those filters. This creature becomes that color until end of turn. Activate only once each turn. So this is kind of like a glue piece for your Vivid decks. If you have a Foraging Wickermaw, you can use it. You know, you're filtering 1 mana through it. So it's not like it's costing you any additional mana to cast some one of your spells, but it's turning this creature into some random color. So that your Vivid is slightly better than what you would normally think it is. This is kind of just like, this is not a very high pick, but if you are in Vivid, this is one of those cards that's just gonna like float around, and you can snap up late in the draft and be perfectly happy with this in your deck. Really helps, I think, with those Vivid decks. Yeah, I think this makes me feel a lot better about that Vivid, trying to do the Vivid strategy. Yeah, Foraging Wickermaw. Gathering Stone is up next. For 4 generic, we have an artifact at uncommon. As this artifact enters, choose a creature type. Spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 generic less to cast. And when this artifact enters and at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a card of the chosen type, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you don't put the card into your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. This is 4 mana, do nothing. Like, sure, it makes your things cheaper later, but at 4 mana, you really need your spells really need to have a pretty good impact. You can, it's a value engine. You can get value off of this. You sort of, maybe you instantly draw a card, so it instantly cantrips, and if it sticks on the battlefield forever, then you're going to get value out of it eventually, as long as you have any sort of reasonable kindred deck, any sort of reasonable tribal deck. But I feel like you need to impact the board. If you're very controlling, then maybe this works, but it feels like a pretty low pick to me. Mirrormind Crown is up next. For 4 generic, we have an artifact equipment at rare. As long as this equipment is attached to a creature, the first time you would create 1 or more tokens each turn, you may instead create that many tokens that are copies of the equipped creature, and it has an equip cost of 2. This is a commander card. It's about putting together this cool scenario where you get a bunch of copies of the same creature, and that makes it trigger a ton of ETBs, or they all synergize with each other. But it's 4 mana for do nothing, and then you have to pay 2 to equip it, and then you have to be generating tokens. No. commander. You would feel awful seeing this in your packs. When you're opening your packs or seeing this in your sealed pool. Puka's Eye is up next. For 2 generic, we have an artifact at uncommon. When this artifact enters, draw a card, then choose a color. This artifact becomes the chosen color. And then for 3 generic and tap it, draw a card, activate it only if there are 5 colors among permanents you control. I'm not as high on this as I am on the Scarecrow. I guess it does just cantrip, right? You play this early, it just cantrips and then becomes a color. Maybe I'm a little harsh on it. But it is not really affecting the board any. Later on, sure, it becomes a pretty powerful draw engine if you're able to get to the full vivid thing. This is one of those where if you're heavy vivid, you're gonna get it late and be happy with it. But if you're not vivid, this is awful. You're never picking this up. Yeah, Puga's Eye. Not much else to say there. Springleaf Drum. This is a cool little reprint. For a single generic, we have an artifact at uncommon. It says tap to tap an untapped creature you control to add 1 mana of any color. So this has been a constructed power level card in the past. Is it constructed power level now? And I don't know. This technically turns your Badger Mole Cub itself into a mana creature, but is that actually true? Let me double check. I don't think that's actually correct. Badger Mole Cub. Whenever you tap a creature for mana, don't think it works that way. Let me check Reddit real quick. Springleaf Drum. So I'm sure, because I'm sure somebody asked this exact same question. Yeah, no. Yeah, right. I'm thinking this doesn't actually work with Badger Mole Cup because it's the Springleaf Drum that's actually generating the mana. But as I was scanning, they did point out that this is interesting with Gran. It is a non-creature spell for prowess triggers if you're playing it alongside Gran, which you're playing with Storm Chaser's Talent in those Gran decks. Works with Kona. We already have planets for Kona, so I don't know exactly if... Well, let me think about Kona. There's one of the things, it kind of ends up being the same issue with planets in that, because I've done the Kona stuff for a while. It's one of the decks that I jam on ladder when I'm wanting to play some standard. One of the big problems is you really need to draw your planets. You're really heavily incentivized to play your planet on turn 1 specifically. Because on turn 2 you want to play your the dragon enchantment to draw and discard, or hold up, consult the star charts, or whatever have you. Maybe you're fine. It's either turn 1 or turn 3 where you're wanting to make sure that you have your planet to play. This being a non-land way to tap your Kona could mean, would you play this in Kona? Or are you too worried about putting too many copies of this that aren't card draw spells and aren't just lands? Part of the value of your station lands is they just produce mana. They don't get in the way of you trying to be able to, when you start going off, making sure that you can keep going forever. I'll probably try it, see how it feels, just to have more options. Because I've also noticed that it can be, if your opponent, when you're in a control matchup, your like Azorius control player can just demolition field your station land for while holding up their counter spell. If you can't get your if you can't get a Cavern of Souls out to get around the counter spell, then you're sort of sitting there going, okay, can't go this turn, gotta wait for them to tap out, or wait till I have enough mana to get to hold up my own counter magic, at which point they just simply kill your station land with their demolition field, and then your SOL until you draw another station land, which enters the battlefield tapped, which puts you off a turn from being able to hold up your counter magic. So maybe I could see a couple copies of Springleaf Drum in the deck already, or in the deck as well. It's cheap. You can squeeze it in at the same time as a consult, or play it on turn 3, holding up a Lost in the Maze. It might even allow you to play creatures, other creatures in your Kona deck. You know, other value creatures in your Kona deck that you can use to tap for actual mana. Help power out a Kona or power out other spells. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Limited. There's a number of creatures that that have tap triggers, which is really pretty much why they're doing this. Why they have this here. Goes very well with your Merfolk decks. Don't know how well it goes in too many other decks, other than the fact that it just turns any of your creatures into mana dorks, which can always be good. So probably okay in limited, and could see play in standard. Stalactite Dagger for 2 generic. We have an artifact equipment at common. When this equipment enters, create a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and is all creature types and has an equip cost of 2 generic. So this doesn't auto-equip to the Changeling creature. Seems pretty bad. I don't really know what world I would play this. I'm desperate for 2 drops. Like, this is not Kyoshi Battlefan. Kyoshi Battlefan was great because you had waterbending. There's no waterbending here. And it doesn't auto-equip like Kyoshi Battlefan to turn your creature into, for it to be essentially a 2/1 for 2. Yeah, no. Don't pick this card. And we're on to our lands. First one we're seeing up here is Blood Crypt. And let's just quickly go over it. We are getting the 5 remaining Shocklands in this set. Pretty clearly the most important cards coming from Lorwyn Eclipsed is the introduction of the Shocklands, the last bit of Shocklands. We had half of them come in Edge of Eternities. This is the other half coming out in Lorwyn Eclipsed, and it's a joyous day for Azorius decks, for Selesnya decks, for Rakdos decks. Let's just go through them. Yeah, Rakdos, Azorius, Golgari decks, Izzet decks, Selesnya decks. Some of them even more than others. Like Izzet still has Spiral of Canal. And Orzhov, well, no, Orzhov already had its thing. But like Azorius and Selesnya in particular, both of those had only the verges plus like the starting towns and the multiversal passages as like dual lands, quote unquote, for their decks. And this is just making so many decks much more viable in standard. We're going to be in a position just now, not even thinking about what other random lands we're going to get in the rest of the 6 additional sets we're getting this year before rotation. We're gonna be in a standard that will allow us to play so much. There already were like the 4-color control lists. Those, I imagine that 4-color control is going to be much more popular once Lorwyn Eclipsed comes out, because the mana is just going to be so good. We've got all of the Surveil lands, we've got all of the Shock lands, all of those verges still have starting towns, still have multiversal passages. It's just going to be, you have that option to be as soupy as you want. And even if you're not being as soupy as you want, you don't, for the deck, for the colors that didn't have these Shocklands, you don't feel like you're playing a neutered version of a colored pair. So, pretty easily the most important cards coming out of the set. Not going to talk about them all specifically. Just realize that that's kind of a blanket statement for all of the 5 Shocklands that we're getting. Let's find our next non-Shockland land we have here. Eclipsed Realms is a land at uncommon. It says, as it enters, choose elemental, elf, fairy, giant, goblin, kithkin, or treefolk, or merfolk or treefolk. So all the relevant Lorwyn creature types. You can tap it for a generic, or tap it to add 1 mana of any color, only to cast spells of that chosen type, or activate abilities of a source of the chosen type. So, you know, it's kind of your unclaimed territory, secluded courtyard for your Lorwyn decks. Considering that you are very heavily incentivized to be tribal and stick to one tribe, this is going to be pretty good. This is often just going to be a dual land. So seems like a pretty good pick in draft. Don't think that it's all that playable in standard. There already is literal like secluded courtyard, plus things like the Cavern of Souls, which is obviously better. But if you are specifically in one of these colors, maybe, or one of these creature types, maybe. It's not like it enters tapped or anything, so yeah, maybe. Maybe you're fine with it. Yeah, Eclipsed Realms. Evolving Wilds is up next as well. Classic. It is about our land at common. You can tap and sacrifice it, search for a basic land, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Common mana fixing, not quite as good, I don't think, as the Eclipsed land that we just saw, Eclipsed Realms. But this is fixing for your non-creature type, your non-typal spells, which Eclipsed Realms doesn't help too much with. So yeah, not much to say there. Already talked about Hollow Fountain, already talked about Overgrown Tomb, Steam Vents, Temple Garden, and that's it. Woo, what a marathon of a week. Overall thoughts about the set. I don't really know, other than these, from a standard perspective, other than these Shocklands. I'm like, there's the Shocklands, there's that white 2-drop. I can't. I'll probably have to just look over the card file again. Let me do that right now. But just off the dome, there's not like a ton of cards where I'm thinking like these are massive options, or are massive standard powerhouses. Let me do this real quick. Hide this here. Let's move all this over into reviewed. Let's see, can I just pull up? I don't really want to do that when I don't know what it's going to look like on the screen. So let's just pull up this. I'll just look at Scryfall over here and then try and find the card as I run into it. So I think Reese the Evermore is... Actually, rather than waste everyone's time as I'm just running through this, I'll come back at some other point, maybe over the weekend, with cards I think that are good to look at. I did that before in the Final Fantasy set. maybe even Edge of Eternities. I didn't do that with Avatar, but I'll come back thinking about high impact cards that I think could see play in Standard. But just overall, it feels like that this is not going to have a ton of impact in Standard, unlike something like the Avatar set, which pretty obviously had a major impact in Standard. Badgermole Cub spawned a number of archetypes, really put green back into actual play in Standard. The Lessons deck is basically a block constructed deck from Avatar. I shouldn't, even more than that, there's the Allies deck, which is literal block constructed for Avatar. There's, Aang, Swift Savior, all the airbending stuff. Those decks kind of fell to the side later, but Avatar had a huge impact on Standard. This feels a little more like it's going to be like on the Aether Drift level, where there's a couple of cards that see some play, but it's mostly about, just get improving some, Aether Drift had stock up and stuff like that, right? So it's not like it's a huge impactor, but it's not miserable. Maybe Aether Drift is not the right example, because Aether Drift was kind of stock up and nothing else from the top of the dome. Maybe it's closer to something like Tarkir Dragonstorm, where there's Meringue River Regent, there's a number of the dragon cards that see play every once in a while. Jeskai Revelation, Shiko, stuff like that had some impact, but not just like this overwhelming impact on there. Here, I think, without like re-going over the cards and really digging too deep into it, there's some important cards coming in. There's Spell Snare. There's the one mana black kill spell. There's the white 2-drop, which we saw this stream, and then obviously all the fetch lands, but not something where entire archetypes are going to come out of this format. I think it's more of a number of role players are going to be there. I do think, well, I don't know for certain. My estimations for limited set, how limited set's going to look, need a little more honing, because I haven't really been thinking about sets from a limited perspective for as long as I have been from a standard perspective. I do think it'll be interesting. It'll be fun to have a kindred tribal creature type matters set. They did release the sort of planned art, or the archetypes that they're really wanting you to draft around, and there's only 5. There's just Goblin, Merfolk, Kithkin, Elf, and Elemental. Even though there's things like Giants, Fairies, Tree Folk, etc. Whatever the other ones that I might have missed from the that we saw on Eclipsed Realms. It's really more centered around just 5, so I wonder if that's just gonna, given that you're dealing in draft pods of 8, I wonder if there's going to be enough available cards to let everyone kind of get into their own lane, or are people going to be really fighting over you're really going to have to be able to read signals, move out of people's way, or be willing to fight over the right cards for your draft deck. Given that it feels very tribal themed. But yeah, I'll probably come back. Well, I might come back with a stream talking about impactful cards for standard. But I might not. You never know. I'm not a professional here. I'm not doing this for any money. I'm doing this because I like it. And if I decide that I don't want to do it, well then I'll see you whenever I see you. Thank you so much for anybody who stopped on by. Anybody who might have been lurking. Anybody who might be lurking now. Anybody who watches the VOD. Thank you once again for joining me for another exciting set of reviews for another Magic the Gathering set. We're going to be getting a lot of them over the course of this year. Some I'm a little more excited for than others. Not terribly excited for the next set, which is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle set. So I might end up taking some off. I think I did the Spider-Man set, but it was pretty mediocre. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you whenever it is I